Good afternoon. Welcome to the Housing and Economic Development Committee hearing. I'm Councilman James Torrance. I'm chair of the committee and representative of the 7th District. Today, the committee will hear City Council Resolution 25014R, informational hearing, vacant abandoned garages. 25063, zoning administrator, transfer to the Department of Planning. And then legislative oversight 25027, accuracy of VBNs and non-contiguous TIF. Today in attendance, we have the Vice Chair of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos of the 14th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Zach Blanchard of the 11th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And then President, we have a host of friends from, Vice President Middleton is here as well, sponsor of 2 of our bills. Thank you, Madam Vice President. We have a host of members, staff of the Council President's Office and the Mayor's Office, and a host of agencies. With that being said, the order for tonight's proceedings will be the zoning administrative bill, where we will have a hearing plus amendment on that bill. Then we will have the vacant garages, and then we'll go into the oversight hearing after that. The goal is to get out of here by 8 o'clock, friends, just to be transparent with you. So brevity and specifics are great things. With that being said, we will go right into the zoning administrative bill, and I will open it up for opening statements from Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for hearing this bill, which is one of the bills that's in the packet of bills that has to do with housing changes that we have been working on for some time. This is very self-explanatory. We know that the zoning administrator has been basically housed in housing for the Department of Housing for some time. And I know on the council, we have been trying to help and work with the administration on just streamlining ways to make processes more sufficient and quicker for our constituency. And this is just very self-explanatory, just transferring that office of the zoning administrator and the work that they do directly in the office of the Department of Planning. The Department of Planning has a strong planning commission that deals with zoning on a regular basis, and this just makes sense. And hoping the committee agrees and we can move this out and start the work in keeping this moving.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I'm going to move into agency reports, first starting with the Law Department.
Thank you, Chair Torrance. Jeff Hochstetler with the City Law Department. The Law Department can approve this bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you, sir. Department of Finance.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Gabriel Stewart-Zykowitz from the Department of Finance. We support this bill. We note that it's already in the 2026 budget, and it includes all 7 positions, as well as increasing the planning's budget by the amount that it is.
Thank you. Department of DCHD.
Good afternoon, Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner. We stand in support of this bill for the transference of the Office of the Zoning Administrator to the Department of Planning, and see that creating efficiencies within the review process. And this was also part of Mayor Scott's Be More Fast initiative as well.
Thank you. Planning.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Eric Tiso for the Department of Planning. We recommend favorable for the bill. Looking forward to assisting the zoning office's transition to planning and, of course, continuing the good work with our colleagues in housing.
Thank you. Are there any questions from colleagues? Perfect. No questions from colleagues. I do have a committee amendment. It will be a verbal one because the legislative reference was unable to draft the amendment, so the amendment shall read as follows. Before approving any reclassification of the position of zoning administrator outside the Civil Service Commission shall provide reasonable advance notice to the City Council. The reason why I'm introducing this amendment is not only from Ms. Floyd's actual testimony, but also I want to make sure that if a person is in a civil service position offering opinions that will impact someone's life, that protections remain in place. And when those protections are no longer in place, this council is notified from the Civil Service Commission, because I believe firmly that in order for democracy to work and government to work, people have to be bold, but also be truthful, as well as be able to serve without any type of pressure nor any type of prejudice. That being said, I move this amendment. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I would say that we do not, as a matter of rules, pass and approve amendments without them being properly drafted in committee.
And I've received opinion from both our council president's office as also the law department that I can move it. They will be drafted prior to. If not, then the bill will be held over for another hearing.
That's fine, but I know that we passed the council rules, and they say very specifically that amendments have to be specifically drafted before they've been voted on. I mean, I would like to see the language. I haven't seen the language. So how can I vote on an amendment that I haven't seen the language?
I can forward that to you. You can check your phone now.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that I can't, and also we haven't had the practice where we approve amendments if we haven't seen them. I did get a set of amendments at like 2:30, but you had just said that this was a verbal amendment.
We went back and forth with the law department. There is a precedent set by Councilman Dorsey in his own hearing where he actually amended the zoning bill verbally before this council, and this council actually voted on said bill. It was actually sent back to his committee, but this council voted out of there.
My understanding was that that was a technical amendment, and where generally what we've said, and it's in the rules, that we don't approve amendments unless they're formally drafted.
And then I will tell you from my law degree that an amendment is an amendment.
Yeah, but
An amendment was
I'm not
passed by
gonna vote
November
on
this
an
council.
amendment that I don't have the language, and I haven't heard any testimony from the law department or anybody else as to whether or not that amendment is for formal legal sufficiency. We haven't had any discussion about the amendment.
Well, you're welcome to see it. Jeff, you have any questions, or are you approving for formal legal sufficiency or not?
The amendment that you read into the record, I can approve for forming legal sufficiency. As to council rules, we defer to council on rules.
Thank you, sir.
To the council rules, I mean, I'm not comfortable looking at any amendment that, first of all, I saw like a minute ago because you just sent it to me. And second of all, that we have said in our rules that we are not approving amendment. I mean, it might be a fine amendment. I'm just saying on principle that we have said we are not approving amendments without them being drafted, and we have a chance to review them.
And I formally sent it back to the law department, and also since it's a legislative reference, to provide that amendment. If you do not wish to vote on it, that's fine, you can vote no, but if Councilman Blanchard does not want to vote on it, that's up to him. But as this chair, I'm going to vote yes, because a member of this body also
Have we had testimony on it? Have we had any of the agencies take a look at the amendment other than the law department?
This was after having conversations with the administration about said amendment because of my things I cannot say publicly about things that I've observed within our agencies.
No, I totally understand what you're saying, and I get it. I mean, what I'm saying is that I think it sets a dangerous precedent if we go against our own council rules that we don't approve amendments without formally, having them written out.
So if I don't move this amendment, for the record, you'll vote no on Councilman Dorsey's bill because an amendment was made verbally in his committee. And it was technical.
I mean, I'd have to look back at what he did. I thought it was a technical amendment, and you know that I have had the same conversation with him when I was on the Land Use Committee last year, and I think the Vice President can attest to that. So the issue is just how do we want to, proceed? If you're talking about it conceptually and then want to put it on the floor for second reader, that's a whole different ballgame. We can certainly do that.
If it's put on the floor for second reader, then it will then have to come back for another hearing, and then will
No, that's not true. That's not how that works. You can absolutely put something on the floor.
It's a zoning bill. It's a zoning bill. It has to be re-advertised for 15 days to then come back to committee. That is the opinion of this law department.
The thing is that...
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, ma'am.
So, I also as sponsor of the bill, I also had conversation with the chair, and I hear that the law department has verbally agreed to form and legal sufficiency on this amendment. And so my suggestion is we don't have I think our next council meeting is not until October 20th. So we have all this verbal decision-making. Can the committee get the written amendment in the committee's hands before this week is out?
That would be based off of legislative reference, and the reason why they cannot actually draft is because of the rules in the council that the council president has changed that has delayed amendments and also delayed bills being drafted. So I'm happy to have a conversation with not only the council, but I think our rules have not been sufficient because people change our legislative reference and our legislative processes to suit themselves. So I'm willing, Councilwoman Ramos, to entertain holding this amendment and then having a voting session prior to our next council meeting, which will allow us to do it, which is a subsequent next week hearing. But I just want to make sure that we as a council be consistent too, right? We've allowed people to vote verbal amendments out of their committees. We've also allowed our council president to change the rules so that our bills have been drafted, and I'm still waiting on bills that to be drafted that we sent 6 months ago because we changed the rules. So I'm just being transparent. Like, if we're gonna have that conversation about our rules, we as a body need to have a conversation about how we change our processes to make sure that we can meet our own rules.
No, and Mr. Chair, to your point, we are in the process of doing updates to the rules, so I'm happy to have that discussion with you since myself and the council president's office are leading that. Happy to do it. I think part of the issue with DLR is a capacity issue, which is indeed what we passed in the budget to be able to add more capacity to that. I'm happy to have that conversation. I want to appreciate Madam Vice President for making that suggestion, and I'd be willing to come back on a voting session to at least we can take a look at the amendment and have a sense of each of the relevant agencies taking a look at it and then come back, because I think that it's relevant enough to do that. But that is why we don't do that, and I'll bring it up to the council president to make sure that each of the chairs are consistent with their putting the rules in place.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos. Thank you, Council Vice President. With that being said, I will withdraw my amendment, and when we can actually go to public comment, we'll recess. And what I'll do is that we will have a voting session next Tuesday for all the members of this committee to actually vote on this bill. Better yet, make it the following Tuesday, just in case we have to do an advertising. I just want to make sure we're safe. So someone in legislative reference, if you're listening, you should be ready to pay for an advertising through the Baltimore Sun. Yes. We can make it the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Is there any public testimony? Yes, Ms. Floyd.
We actually couldn't hear what the amendment was, and so if you could go over it, then we could, if there's any comment, we could give the comment on that now. That would be, I think very helpful.
Yes, Ms. Floyd. So before approving any reclassification of the position of zoning administrator outside the civil service, the Civil Service Commission shall provide reasonable advance notice to the City Council. The reason why is because if we wanted to take this position and make it independent similar to the IG's office, we would have to pass a charter amendment. Because the position is a protected class under civil service, I wanted this council to be provided notice when that position is reclassified, which then will make it at will, which means they could be fired without cause or without having a conversation. So the reason why I did that is until we actually have a charter amendment passed or we draft one, that will be a reasonable exception to move this forward to allow Mr. Tissot and his staff to receive technically the staff they've already received. But make sure that the protections are there to alert us if anything is not protected therefore after.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks for, I hope others could hear that, because now I can hear it, but I couldn't hear it when I was back there. Okay, so the reason I'm here, I didn't want to be here, but I did raise some issues with the law department back in July, and I never got the response or follow-up that I was expecting. I do have a copy for the gentleman who's here today, but I did present concerns about the necessity to maintain the ability to appeal a permit or a decision of the zoning administrator. It's called a negative appeal, and in fact, when you look at the rules of the BMZA, it says it has to be filed within 10 working days of the issuance of the permit by the zoning administrator. So if we're not considering the zoning administrator to be someone who is associated with the issuance of a permit any longer. It's DHCD issues the permits, zoning administrator issues some kind of a decision. The question is, with this change, how do we know, what is the triggering event that allows us to know that the 10 days period has started? I mean, that's a simplification of what I wrote in my testimony, but basically right now, when the permit is issued, that is the same as the zoning administrator decision that day. And it's pretty straightforward and simple, but what's going to happen when this change is made?
Thank you, Ms. Floyd. And then what I can do is get you an answer to that question until we get an answer for you in writing back to you so that you have that understanding officially from us.
Well, I want to make sure it's protected in the code. If there's some change that might be needed, I just don't know. But there was something in one of the testimonies from one of the agencies that said there might be some confusion initially. I think this could be one of the initial points of confusion. And again, with the new system as well, it's much more difficult now to tell when something has actually been issued. It used to be very straightforward. Just it was right there, it was a date. Now it's a different type of system. So it's that's the concern. Make sure we don't lose that.
That's fine. We'll work on getting your response. Is there any other public testimony? Is there any public testimony online? You can identify yourself by using the raise hand function. Perfect. With that being said, we are going to recess this hearing and come back on the 7th, Council Vice President. I don't think you have to be there. We're just going to vote this thing out. And also, I respect your opinion, Councilwoman Ramos. You are my friend. But we're going to have these heated discussions in public. But I am a person who believes that we need to be transparent, and I will put everybody's business on Front Street together. With that being said, we're going to recess this hearing, and then we will start with our next hearing, which is 25001 4R, informational hearing, vacant and abandoned garages, for the purpose of requiring representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development to appear before the City Council to provide insight into the issue of vacant and abandoned garages in Baltimore City and to discuss strategies, including interim liens or foreclosures to manage and control the issue and its impact of safety, aesthetics, and community economics. This bill was introduced on March 10th, 2025, sponsored by Vice President Middleton. The chair will wait to have comments after the sponsor. With that being said, Chair recognizes Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And I do see some residents in some of my neighborhoods that are going to testify. But I requested this informational hearing to discuss the numerous vacant and deteriorating garages within Baltimore City. Over the years, these garages have increasingly become unsafe and unsanitary. I am requesting that the Department of Housing clarify the process they follow to address this blight, with the hope that we can reach some form of resolution during today's hearing. I have received hundreds of calls regarding the dilapidated and abandoned garages in District 6, particularly in the Garrison Hill community on Yell Street behind the 3700 and 3800 blocks of Duffield Avenue, as well as in Windsor Hills behind the 4,000 and 4,100 blocks of Woodhaven Avenue, and I have spoken with several of my council colleagues who are facing similar experiences. In conclusion, I want to emphasize the urgency and importance of addressing the issue of vacant and deteriorating garages within Baltimore City. These structures pose significant safety and health risk to our communities. I urge the Department of Housing to provide a clear outline of their strategies to tackle this blight. It is my hope that today's hearing will lead to actionable resolutions and solutions and a commitment to revitalizing our neighborhoods. Thank you to everyone who has voiced their concerns and to my council colleagues who share in this mission. Together we can work toward creating a safer and more vibrant environment for all residents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Just to add to your comments, I myself do experience this in my district, especially in the Parkway community. We actually had Commissioner Kennedy, and thank you to Superintendent Street, who's been there every point of the way with us. We've had a number of issues addressed because of it, but I still lean that we got to do better. We have good people that do good work. My gravest issue with not only this issue is that we have garages that have no roofs. There's water, they have vacant water, they have water bills that have not been paid. We're seeing things where they are being stored intentionally for things that we shouldn't. I'll give you an example. In the Parkway community, I saw Bell Atlantic phone books to the height of the actual garage ceiling. I've seen stolen vehicles stored in an actual garage. I've seen more than that being dumped in a garage. I've seen sex work happen around those garages. I think we need to understand not only your processes, but what help that you need for us to help you move these along, because not everything can be done on the ground. And I wholeheartedly believe that as a citizen legislature, we can change the laws to help you do what you need to do. And I hope that the presentation and the comments that you'll have will provide us with some clarity as well as some action points for us to do. With that being said, we will go directly into agency reports. Department of Public Works.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Christine Griffin, Department of Public Works, Chief of Legislative Affairs. We are with that recommendation and defer to DHCD unless there are specific questions for DPW.
Thank you. Environmental Control Board.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Nina Themelis, Director of Government Relations for Mayor Scott on behalf of the Environmental Control Board. In their submitted report, they note that they're an independent administrative hearing board and they issue citation. They are responsible for holding the hearings that are requested by the recipients of citations issued by DHCD, and due to their need to maintain neutrality, they take the position of without recommendation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And then DHCD.
Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner, DHCD. Here we stand by our written report. We do have a presentation that we were going to share, so we can go into that. I really want to thank Vice President Middleton for bringing this informational hearing. It's one that we've actually talked about for a while, and I think for whatever reason, it just kept getting pushed back onto the back burner. It's one that the agency has been eager to talk about as well. Councilman Torrance, Chair Torrance, also know that this has been an issue in your communities as well as lots of the conversations that we've had over the years, and also the recent walk that we did in Parkway as well. So we're gonna go over a little bit on the next slide, talk a little bit about some of the assessments, demolition, some of the acquisition challenges. This actually, we did include some photographs from the walk that we just recently did with Chairman Torrance, in the Parkway community, looking at the garages that they have significant issues with. We've also done similar walks in the Ashburton community and other communities that Vice President Middleton has stated before. Overall, there is, same type, on the next slide, we talk about the same type of process in terms of code enforcement inspectors, typically from 311 or other complaints, or also just on the routine inspections, look for casual entry and risk of collapse. The garage, potentially would be issued a notice for those specific defects. In terms of assessment, we do look for the unsightly or unkempt garages, the no roof, and other citable offenses that would be under the building and fire code, related code. We can and will do demolition of garages if the physical integrity of the garage appears to threaten public safety, and assess it for any risk of imminent collapse. We have the legal authority to do that demolition or stabilization, depending on either demolition or stabilization, depending upon conditions, with proper due process in terms of notification to the owner of the property. Sometimes stabilization is not actually the, in terms of cost and the route to take. Although in the Parkway community, we just had some conversations about potentially doing something along those lines, and seeing then how we could work with the community on acquisition of those garages and then repurposing back into productive use as we would a vacant property, because there were members of the community that could see a use for garages if they were maintained and in good condition, and working from there. We can utilize both in REM, we can do condemnation, receivership, same kind of requirements for other property. As long as, we have the lien assessment where the lien is greater than the assessed value, that would qualify for in REM. There are lots of, especially the old lots that we have, but we do have parcels where the garage does now qualify for in REM. One of the hardest things, and I think all of you know this from the work that we've done on garages, one of the more difficult things is that some of the properties, garages actually don't qualify for in REM, and they're dilapidated because they're still tied actually to the deed of the main house. When we were out in the Parkway community, we actually met a young woman who recently purchased her house and did not know that the garage right on the corner with some wonky conditions, that's the building code terminology, that's the technical term. She was not aware that her deed included the garage, and it was not made aware to her at the time of transfer. And you can see that because when on the garage parcel, it was actually tied to it was like about a $225,000 transfer cost. And you can see that that was part of the deed associated with her property. It was all as one. So this is also one of the things that has come up that we've talked about with Vice President Middleton in the past as well, is that there are some homeowners that still own properties that also don't know that their property is attached to the garage, and that actually would be a garage that they could either utilize or that they need to take responsibility for, or they don't understand when they get the citations. And then we have some where it's, still showing an address, but it's sold 3 times and now is no longer able to trace back because of the way that the deeds were separated and different things along those lines. So it is somewhat of a, if you love investigations, it is a great, and you love history and you love doing research. We actually have had some community members offer to do this research as well and be part of it. In the Parkway community, what we did was we teamed our code enforcement team and Levette Street with our SIU team so that they could work together and do the investigations and also look at what needed to happen in terms of tracking down the actual owners, and if they're deceased, if they're alive, what their mailing address is, so we can also get proper service. Because that's been one of the issues as well, is being able to get proper service on some of the garages to get citations paid and so forth. One other piece that I want to highlight and some of the challenges, just, I talked a little bit about just how to capture some of that data, how to capture the ownership data. We've been focused on the vacant properties as well as some of the other 311 issues and the interior inspections, et cetera. But we do know that and this is one reason why we included properties like the vacant garages in the mayor's Reframe Baltimore $3 billion plan under kind of the infrastructure bucket, includes some of that, funding for demolition or different things related to alleys, garages, green spaces, et cetera, and needing to do this. The other piece is that we haven't ever had any funding that we've kind of said, okay, this demolition funding, we will take part of it and use it for garages, which it will be a lesser amount of money, but we've never done that because the focus has been on abating the VBN on the vacant property and using that in that regard. So one of the things that we know too is just, increasing that community outreach and engagement, continuing to engage communities and help. We, got a lot of valuable research and information from being out with the community in terms of helping to put and tie together like knowledge from the neighbors on who owns what and who was where. So we absolutely know that the garages are an issue. We know that they impact the quality of life for our residents. We know that we need to increase the number of either vacant building notices and work that we can do on those garages. And we are also going to be setting aside demolition funds to help with the garages as well once we complete due process, and can look to see how best to demolish the garages. Like I said, in one instance, they were like, could they be stabilized and then somehow purchased because the community actually would like to use them. And we're also open to working with community on what the community would like to see as a positive outcome, whether or not it be demolition and lot space or stabilization and productive use. So we welcome the opportunity to talk more about this. We know that it's not perfect. We know that there are challenges, like we said, in terms of tracking down some of the owners, getting proper service to be able to utilize the different legal functions. And in some instances, like we said, they're not, they're still deeded with the main property, and trying to work to make sure that people know that they have a garage that they're responsible for. The other thing is we don't have any type of repair program or anything, right? We've been focused on, and our focus has been on repair in the home to help people with their roofs, the furnaces, et cetera. And we have run into people that when they've received the citation or notice that are like, well, I would actually want to use my garage or clean it up, but I need $5,000 for a new door and a roof, and there's nowhere to go. So in the grand scheme of things as well, it's also balancing home repair for persons living in conditions inside of a property and their living conditions, and not having also a funding program or something to help people with garages. We're just not there yet, but that could be something down the road. But the need is so great, I would say, on our occupied, habitable spaces that we need to ensure are safe before we go there. So, we do take the issue seriously. We do want to work with all of you in your communities on how best to tackle the garages, and are welcome to any feedback, information, and ways or things that you would like us to improve on in that work. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to committee questions. I'm gonna defer to Council Vice President Middleton, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've been dealing with this, I'm in my 19th year on this council, and this has been an issue in all those years. There has been deaths at some of these garages. So I'm trying to understand when you mention that you need to capture data. My office has lots of data from just the experiences and the community meetings that I go to. This seems to always be the subject. I don't understand why it has not been elevated as a problem to help with values of properties. We have people that want to help their blocks, that want to buy another house in the area, and they stop because they know that garage is behind there. We have people that, travel through neighborhoods and the house is beautiful, and they go around the back and see these dilapidated garages where trees are growing through. It's like it should be part of the efforts that you're trying to do overall in our neighborhoods, the revitalization of our neighborhoods. So I'm just trying to understand, you say you have under challenges community outreach and education play a role. So that's telling me that housing doesn't do community outreach. I'm just confused of why you put that as a challenge. You say community outreach and education play a vital role in helping residents understand. Well, I don't think that you've accomplished that goal, because my office is the one that's encouraging community to be patient. We're trying to get this resolved. What I'm seeing here is still some strong unresolved issues. This is a very important piece of revitalization. Your response.
Thank you. I think we put down the community engagement and outreach as a challenge, just because it is still a challenge to have some of the conversations with the community members that we need to have conversations with about garages that are owned by members of the community. Like I said, we do take this seriously. We do understand it is an issue. I understand wholeheartedly your frustration as well as the community's frustration in terms of the number of years associated with the work on the garages and the impact it has. That's why we did include the garages as part of a cost factor when we were looking at building what was needed in terms of tackling vacant properties in the city. So we have included that now.
These two communities that I know of, they have, they're very strong community associations that have community meetings on a regular basis. And I would bet that no representative from housing has come to talk about the garages. So there's been a void. There's been a void and ignoring, I feel, ignoring the situation.
I'm sorry that you feel that way. I can understand the frustration, and
I give credit for code enforcement, and when we do get the calls and they periodically come out and follow the process to get a certain thing resolved, but it's not really resolved. It's just padding the situation. And this can't go on any longer. This is a strong part of attracting homeowners in our communities, and this needs to take precedence. These garages, by the way, are in majority African-American communities. So this is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous that this subject has not been in the forefront of everything that you're doing. You're still putting it aside. You're not, I just, you say you understand, but I don't think you understand. The mayor's office, I really want this to be at the forefront of things that you're doing when you're revitalizing a community. These two neighborhoods they're loads of homeowners that have been there 50 or more years. And they're staying there because they have some kind of hope. But when I see things like this, it's not verifying what the message that I'm giving. So please help me out here. I'm just not, this right now seems a waste of my time.
May I ask a clarifying question, Madam Vice President? Because I have a similar frustration. And would you be amenable to us having maybe an agreement between us and administration on what a process will look like to address garages? And we work together on what that looks like in terms of community engagement. I just want to make sure we leave with something tangible because this impacts me, this impacts all of us. I think that if we are all on the same page for like, this is the process, I think that is the meaningfulness of having this conversation now, because I see differences in terms of what is available in terms of like resources for them. But my question is, what is doable citywide and what we can agree upon, no matter what the council district is, what is that exact process?
Mr. Chair, I held up this conversation for a long time because I was asked so they could get more information, concrete information. And this is not the information that I was looking for. Really, it's just repeating things that we already know.
Okay.
It's no actionable things here. No one has said what they're going to do, what monies they're going to put in place to help with this. Finance Department, do you have a answer to that as far as finances? Because everything is surrounded by funding.
We can certainly come back to you on that. I don't have an answer off the top of my head.
I can speak to that we are, in speaking with Deputy Hessler and how on the demolition budget that's in the capital budget, we will be putting part of that funding that is used for planned demolition towards the demolition of garages. So it'll be a dedicated pot of money specific to garages, which has never occurred in the past.
That hurts my ears to hear, because that was what I was promised over a year and some change ago for dollars put aside to demo garages in Parkway. So, Council Vice President, I have a similar feeling right now. So, Nina, this is what we're going to do, because my patience is drawing thin. So, we need to we're going to recess this. We're going to come back with.
I have some questions.
I'm going to make a committee
We
request.
need to listen to some of our residents that took their time to come here as well.
Yeah, so just so we have next steps, because I hear her frustration. I'm here, my left ear is burning because something that was told to me a year and a half ago should have been done in terms of dedicating demolition dollars. I think that, here's the thing, I think it needs to be two. One is within the time that we set forth with me and Council Vice President Middleton on bringing back this bill, this resolution to have another hearing, I think in that time, the agency should report back, whether it be in presentation, in a writing, in a memo, the exact SOP that it's going to use internally for its staff in addressing the dilapidated garages. Also, what agencies that they're coordinating with, the specific staff persons who will be in charge of this SOP, because we love having SOPs, but nobody's name's attached to who's actually following it and the fidelity of it. I want to know just that basic level, whether it be from the code enforcement side of in terms of issuing the citation to the law enforcement, the legal side of it in terms of going to housing court. Because this is another issue I have with the agency, that they have two separate code enforcement divisions, which show when it all should be one. But that's a different conversation for a different day. But I just want to make sure that each one of those sides of code enforcement has an SOP with points of contacts for this exact process. I want to know if it is a superintendent that's handling this for the entire city, and this is the process that they have outlined, and then who is the person on whatever the special investigation unit, wherever those people are, who on the special investigations unit, and what legal filings they're making, how often they're going to make those legal filings, the total number of legal filings they're going to make, whether it be quarterly. I want all of that because that allows us to go back to our community to say that, hey, we have the X number citations issued on it citywide. These are the number of properties that are going to NREM. These are the dollars that we've identified for demolition that we have citywide each year moving forward, so that we at least have some semblance of a plan in place, and not just a pretty PowerPoint deck, just being transparent. And I would like that to be received back to the council prior to a new hearing, so we have some time to digest it and make suggestions and questions about it, to have it be informed publicly as well. So I will work with Council Vice President as well as council staff to give that date. Once we have that date, you have your timeline to backfill what your deliverables are to get there, but also see how you can institute it as well. With that being said, do you have any more questions, Council Vice President Middleton?
No.
Is that at least helpful to you? I just want to make sure,
Yes.
because I feel your frustration. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the Vice President for bringing this. A couple of things, one might be, and one might be added to the request. But Commissioner, I don't know of any of the dilapidated garages. Well, let me just say this. There seems to be two tracks here. One is the garages that are separated. So in one of my neighborhoods, which you're very familiar with, there's the property, the alley, garages, right? Mm-hmm. You're very familiar with that one. And in a similar situation in another one around the other part of the district. And so in that sense, which I think is what a lot of them are around the city, is that there's the main house, and then there's this one in the back. Usually that one is not actually owned by the person that has that, okay? So there's like we'll call them detached lots. Let's just call them detached lots, okay? So it might come up with a better word, whatever. That seems like a different track than the garages that are actually on somebody's property, okay? So if we think about those two tracks, it sounds like there's going to be a different process for both, because you could put, theoretically, although even though I have lots of dilapidated garages on that strip in that particular neighborhood, I don't have any VBNs on them. If those can get VBNs because they have separate owners most of the time, right, and separate deeds, right, then we should be able to do that pretty quickly in terms of what the council, what the chair and the vice president are asking in terms of, you know, getting the inspections and all of that for those garages. The ones that are like on people's property, which is true in another neighborhood that you're familiar with, is a lot tougher, right? Because it is a separate structure. We usually put the VBN on the main structure where somebody lives. So it sounds like we need another set of processes to think about, or at least articulated better than what we have here in terms of how do we address those. Some of them may need to be demolished. I actually, you know, if somebody wants to rehab their garage, they need to do it. I don't want to take it from Ms. Jones' heat and roof and all of that, right? So I agree with you there. So what that part is going to end up being, right? So it sounds like we need to just have those two tracks of how to think about the garages. Does that make sense? And we can add that to the clarification on his on the chair's.
Yeah, and that's how we were addressing, and I apologize if my description and overview of the slides also didn't explain some of those complexities that we were trying to look at in terms of breaking it up into chunks in terms of how to address the different issues that we have in terms of in terms of the garages. I think it actually would be more than two potential, but it is definitely at least a minimum of 2 tracks.
But that would be articulated in the information that we're gonna clarify. with
Yeah,
you to get
and
for-
we have that. I mean, the operating procedure, and we can be clear on this, you know, the operating procedure for issuing the citations and violations is the same as it would be for, you know, another vacant building or other structure that needs repair. So, but we will provide that in writing to the committee as well.
So then appreciate that, and I'll add it in writing, which I usually do when I make the requests. But the other piece of this is if you could give us examples of some of the garages that actually have VBNs on them, because I don't have any in my district that I know of. And that would be helpful, because I do have some in some of the neighborhoods that you're familiar with that I think it could use a VBN. And the other thing is that I just got the data from finance, which I get every September, which I've shared with the council, and we're analyzing right now about all of the properties that have VBNs on them and the amount of liens that they have on them. And I have to go back and see if garage are actually on that list, because I don't think they are. No, it wouldn't say garage. It may end up being, and a lot of them don't have addresses. They're block lots, right? So I do have a list of block lots, so I'll just check it to make sure that those are added, because we want to make sure that I'm getting the full data on that information. So yeah, and then the last thing is, I guess, to the Vice President's question around the outreach. Generally, when we're telling people to call 311, it's for, you know, high grass and weeds and things like that. And I don't know that people know that they can call 311 and ask for a vacant building inspection. The way that it's worded on 311 is it's a housing inspection, and then it says vacant building. And so, because it used to just say vacant house, and we changed it to say vacant building because we wanted to make it clear that it was going to be commercial and residential. So I don't know whether we need to have a separate 311 for garage. And I guess the Vice President can weigh in on this if that would be something helpful, or if it's included in vacant building, but we've just got to be able to say it to folks that you can ask for a vacant building inspection, because the definition of putting a VPN on is that it's uninhabitable. Excuse me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That makes, yes.
Because I think we need to do a better job of saying that.
Sorry.
Councilman Blanchard. Oh, sorry. Councilman Jones has joined us from the 12th District. Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the Vice President introduced this bill, I was really excited about it because back before I was on the council and I worked for Midtown Benefits District, my first 3 weeks on the job, I literally spent just walking up and down all of the alleys in Midtown. It's 144 blocks, so walked all of them like twice, trying to get a sense of why all the alleys were so not pleasant places to be. So I am really sympathetic to the challenges that our alley spaces have. The northern part of Madison Park in the Chair's district, Charles North and Councilman Jones' district, the western and eastern portions of Mount Vernon do have a lot of these garages. So yeah, definitely generally excited about this, but I did look on Code Map and I think there was like one garage that was part of a separate property. So at least in the like central sort of areas of the city, it looks like the majority of these, to the Councilwoman Ramos's point, are part of a larger property. Yep. And so figuring out how to effectively address that is I think really important. Just more broadly, a lot of our alleys are bad and are bad spaces you don't want to be in. And even if we demolish the garages, there's still a lot of that challenge there. So I don't, lastly, I think I'll just say, I like pitching the virtue of drones for like a lot of things in city government. And if you just had one drone that just went up and down all the alleys, you could identify the bad garage roofs really quickly, of which there's probably a lot more than we are tracking. So I will just throw those out there as thoughts if that hasn't been looked at.
Yeah, we, actually, staff gave to me in the last month the drone policy for the agency, and we're finalizing our purchase of drones and maintenance. The biggest hangup is a maintenance plan situation that we're trying to figure out right now. And we know which staff will be trained for those, and we'll be getting those purchased here soon.
And that would be used for identifying vacant buildings typically, right?
It'll be used for a number of different, across the agency, for a number of different, so for potential vacant buildings, roofs, also on our repair team, inspection team. So we have it across the board for a number of different divisions.
Okay, I'd be curious to see that when it, once that gets finalized, to see what y'all are thinking through that. I'm glad to hear that you're doing it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have a follow-up. Why the delay? Because I believe this discussion, if I remember, conversation with Councilwoman Porter was end of 23, early 2024. We're now in 2025. So
Yeah,
why was
it
there a
was,
delay?
Staffing issues and timing on that, and then we finally got the right staff person on the job to finish it up. And also, they've spent several months working with the law department, police department, and some other things on what was already in existence, what could happen, and moving it forward. So we finally got the right staff person on to tie up all of the research, coordination, and ends on what needed to happen on that.
So that's nearly 2 years later?
I asked for payment plans 5 years ago, and I still don't have it, so.
I know. Nina, can we have a meeting to discuss this? Because that was something that was promised back in 2023, and I have the memory of an elephant, and this was supposed to have been rolled out by then, before this. So I would like an update on why it took so long, the challenges that staff ran into, and I would like to understand the discussions that they have with the law department and the police department about it, because something that was discussed prior to a public conversation in 2023 that is now happening in 2025, that to me needs to have a conversation, because again, something that this council asked for, was promised, is still delayed, and this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll follow up with you following the hearing to get specifics on the scope of the meeting and make sure that that takes place.
Thank you. Can I have that in 3 weeks?
Once I receive more specifics from you
So
following the
today is
hearing,
the
I will make
30th.
sure that we get
What
some
does
scope.
make 3 weeks? So 3 weeks was 21st, please.
And that would just be for the meeting to have taken place by that time.
Yes.
I believe that that is possible, but I'll follow up if there are any issues in coordinating calendars due to vacations or other issues, but I will make sure that that moves forward.
God willing. Councilman Jones.
Just really quick, more less of a question, but more of a statement. I've been hearing a lot about how this has been delayed, and it's an issue that we raised before. But I just want to highlight, in some of the communities I represent, like Darley Park, we toured Darley Park. There, these garages exist, and I think the sooner we can come up with a solution, I think it'll double down on all the progress that we're doing in Darley Park in the neighborhood. So just wanted to raise up the importance of urgency and figuring out how we can, tackle this issue, because there's a lot of communities that are doing great things and heading in a great direction, and we don't want this issue to hinder that progress. So thanks.
No, thank you,
And thanks for
Councilman.
touring Darley Park with us.
Absolutely, and we talked about those garages when we were in Darley Park on that walk as well. So And prior to you, spoken about those Dartley Park garages with Councilman Ramos, so we'll continue to do that.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, could you add as a action item before we schedule the next meeting? I'd like some data on what community associations they have visited to talk to the residents, and some updated data and dates and when they will visit the association where these garages are to listen to the community and also educate them on what they should say when they make 311 service requests as well.
Okay. Tony, you have it? Perfect. Colleagues, any more questions or comments? Perfect. We're gonna go with public testimony. That's fine. No one signed up on a sheet, so if you are present here and would like to do public testimony, you can come forward individually, one by one, and you'll have 3 minutes. And please use the push the button on the side.
Okay, sorry about that. My name is Daryl Dickerson, and I'm representing the Woodhaven community. I've currently been in contact with Ms. Middleton's office since 2008. Before then, I had meetings with the city controller, Joan Pratt. We had discussed, she invited me down to City Hall. We discussed about these vacant garages and the vacant properties that are in the community. Since then, I haven't had any results. Since 2008, we sit here, we listen to individuals say, hey, we have a plan, we're gonna meet. And here we are, 2025, going into 2026, and no action has been taken since. Ms. Middleton know how passionate I am about what we've been trying to do. Her team came out just 2023, 2024, did a visit, they assessed it. We realized that we have an issue. Wild animals, rabid animals walking through all through the garages, and all of them are dilapidated. I made a conscious decision back in 2028, 2029 to move back into the community. My father got sick, took care of him. Once he passed, I had a decision to move back where I was at or stay in Baltimore City. I chose to stay in Baltimore City, although the houses were falling down in the area. I made a personal investment to improve the neighborhood, and once I renovated several homes, sold them for a very, for affordable housing for people moving in. Some of the complaints that I've had was that the realtor gave feedback to me was that they didn't want to move in the community because the garage is in the back or the house next to them was dilapidated, falling down. So we've lost a lot of new residents coming into Baltimore City because of these houses were dilapidated in their garage. Ms. Middleton did a tour of the back. The houses, the garages back there are just falling apart. I got an email from Allison Kennedy here after Ms. Middleton had reached out to her. We have data to say, hey, most of these garages are not deeded to the house. They are separately deeds, and the people who own them are deceased, and we still haven't moved on it. We still haven't moved, so we have the data. Ms. Middleton was gracious enough to pull the data, send it to me. We have it. So here we are, 2025, and nothing's still been done. I'm sitting here listening to the room today, it's very disappointing because we can move on everything else in other areas quickly, but we can't work with these communities who are suffering. So it's very frustrating to sit here and listen to this. Yeah, I'm in the process. I've told my fiance the other day, I'm ready to move. And I have renovated several houses in the area. I had 2 people move out of those beautiful homes with Ms. Middleton Shaw. Moved out because they couldn't take the alley and the garages being dilapidated. So they moved. So, and we talk about redeveloping our communities. How are we gonna redevelop communities, get people into the inner part of the city, not the outer skirts of, everybody can't move down Harbor East and those areas like that. But yet, I continue to see where the progress is being made in certain areas and not others. So it's very frustrating to have to go through this in 2008. Started with our controller, Joan Pratt, where she was nice enough to invite me down to City Hall back then and discuss some of the issues. And then from there, I started working with Ms. Middleton and her team, and she's been gracious enough and very frustrated with me as well. We've been frustrated with each other. And here we are today, still listening to all of you. Talk about, we have a plan. We want to revisit this, retable it. 2008. I mean, how much longer is it going to be?
Yes, sir. I hear your frustration. I feel it, representing neighborhoods who are impacted. But that's why we made our request so that we could have in writing a process so that we know that I'm gonna use a football analogy. We can't move the goalpost if we don't even know where the goalpost is. And if it keeps getting moved, we need to actually define it. And I want to define that thing so that we, as a council, are held responsible, as well as the agency and the staff are responsible, especially the explicit persons who will be responsible for it. So I thank you for your testimony. I'm going to go with the next person. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Chair, VP Council Middleton, esteemed members of this committee, and municipal officials. My name is Tawan Rice, and I'm a resident, and I serve as a leader of the Garrison Hill Community Association. Essentially, that's like Greater Dole-Field area within Northwest Baltimore. Let me first sincerely thank Councilwoman Middleton and her staff for their diligence and tireless efforts over the past several years to address this work to remedy the issue of vacant and abandoned garages within Garrison Hill and around District 6. When I first moved into Garrison Hill 10 years ago, one of the first safety concerns that grappled our community was a violent assault and killing of a young lady that occurred during the fall of 2016 within one of the abandoned garages along Yale Street. That tragedy underscored the dangers and neglected and unsecured garages can pose when left to decay. Alongside the constant barrage of illegal dumping, we have rows of dilapidated garages without doors or roofs and overgrown lots where garages once stood. These structures have become breeding grounds for rodents, as well as havens for squatting, for drug use, and even sex trafficking. These garages continue to erode our quality of life, our property values, and compromise our safety. As a matter of fact, I just received a call earlier today from a resident regarding illegal dumping in front of her, next to her, at a dilapidated garage next to her, her garage, which she takes care of, and she's always receiving citations for the trash left next to her garage. My residents and I remain available for community engagement regarding addressing this matter. This is a conundrum of unclear policy, and we keep being told that we, the community, can't do anything to move this forward. We are frankly sick and tired of this proverbial football constantly being punted. As we continue to move this resolution forward, as you continue to move this resolution forward, I strongly urge you to ensure that any strategies also take into account not to forget our legacy residents or our seniors that are on fixed incomes and typically have limited financial means and the physical ability to remediate these properties themselves. We do need impactful steps that prioritize communication, equitable enforcement, and accountability for absentee garage owners who do not live in or near our community. The last thing I'll say is this is not just about aesthetics. It is about dignity, it's about safety, and restoring trust that every neighborhood, especially those like ours, deserve consistent attention and protection. I thank you, Mr. Chair, and this committee for the opportunity to testify regarding this extremely important safety matter this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any other public testimony from anyone present? Perfect. If you're online and wish to testify, you can use the raise hand function to signify that you want to be heard. Seeing no hands raised, we're going to recess this committee hearing and come back at an additional date. That date will be emailed to the administration. Thank you. Next, we'll go into our oversight hearing, which is LO 250227, accuracy of EBN and non-contiguous TIF, for the purpose of calling relevant city agencies and representatives as well as third-party stakeholders to review and discuss the city's policies around the implementation of EBNs and the non-contiguous tax incremental financing. This was introduced on August 18th, sponsored by Chair Torrance. I am going to add comments, and then we will go into comments from the Vice Chair and then agency reports. As a person who firmly believes in the strategy that is being put forth with our affordable housing TIF, sorry y'all, it's been a late day, a long day. I believe that one of the things that this council needs to do is understand what's happening. One is where we are in terms of the law, what is the strategies being deployed as we're preparing to go to market. I think that this is an opportunity for us to educate the public and use this as a stomping ground for people to know. People know that this thing has been hanging out there. It's going to happen. I want my residents, I want my colleagues on this council who were not with us in the previous term to be given the information so that we can be not only thought partners, but also cheerleaders for this strategy, because I firmly believe, as a son of Baltimore, when Black neighborhoods thrive, Baltimore thrives. I'm just going to be transparent about it, because the bulk of this TIF will impact Black and brown neighborhoods. As a person who represents the red line communities that this will mostly impact and those who have large vacancy numbers, this is important to my neighbors because this council has offered housing legislation that is different than what the strategy is employing. I think that we have an opportunity to no longer to be disjointed in how we do this, and this is a strategy that we can use to actually join together as not only a city, but cohesively use it to benefit my Black and brown neighbors. And to the Black women who have sustained our tax base, who want to have the amenities and to be seen as their neighborhoods once were, this is about providing resources, but also putting our money where our back is, and just saying that, and I say back, not our mouths, because it's gonna take a lot of lifting to move this in the right direction and move our city in the right direction. This is something that has far outlived me in my 38 years of life. I can tell you, as a person who has a relative's house who's actually on this actual list, and my family lost it as an heir's property. The opportunity to see a family in that house, to actually see it be put back onto the tax rolls and benefiting those people in that neighborhood, means a lot to me. I say that because I've seen what's happening in East Baltimore with my family house at 930 Broadway, and how that has changed that house. That house once was worth $60,000 in 1999 when it was purchased, and now it is valued at $340,000. Some of my neighbors were displaced because of it. So I just want to make sure that as we move this strategy forward, we have these constant communications. And I thank you and the administration, as well as both you, Commissioner Kennedy, Director Munson, because this is bold. I'm gonna be transparent with you. I believe in boldness. If we're gonna get this right, we're gonna get this right. But I'm willing to bang my buck and put my back out there and say that this is the right thing to do. And for those who are listening, bet on Baltimore. And I say that as someone who firmly believes that this was the first free Black city in this country. We have an opportunity to make sure that we don't make the mistakes of District of Columbia, Harlem, Bed-Stuy, and that this city remains 66% Black. I'm just gonna be transparent. That's why I'm having this hearing, because those are the people that I wanna make sure remain here and benefit from it. So with that being said, I'll yield to Councilwoman Ramos. It's been a long day, y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for having this meeting. I want to just agree with you that, I'm a fan of, we need all the tools to address the vacant property crisis that we're finally getting, I think, some traction on. And non-contiguous TIF is bold. It's innovative. We're going to be the first in the nation to do it. And I think the way that we do this is by being strategic. And I know it took a couple of years to really think it through and get it right. So I'm glad that that has occurred, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about how the deployment will occur. And I do want people to bet on Baltimore, because I think that we can make it happen. And the fact that this TIF, again, we're gonna differentiate between the TIFs that we've had in the past, which have been downtown, along the White L, very big, large developments. This is innovative because we're saying we want to make these investments of these bonds and into our neighborhoods. You know, it is a neighborhood TIF, but it's also very specific that we can use TIF dollars for affordable housing, so that we can work this strategy into making sure that we have intentional, strategic, mixed income communities that we all have been talking about. So I am looking forward to hearing more, and also knowing, you know, want to make sure that the administration knows that we want to be partners on this, which is why we passed the legislation, and that having these conversations transparently about what's happening so that we can have the right language as we talk about it. So I'm looking forward to that. The second part of this is and the reason we're doing, we kind of put them together, is that the accuracy of the VBN, and I've been very public about in my letters to the BVRC and in other places, that there are times when I believe that there should be a property that is designated a VBN and it doesn't get designated, and it's extremely frustrating. And so want to explore that a little bit in terms of, first of all, the committee and the public understanding what the definition of a vacant building notice is, what qualifies a house as a vacant building notice, and then what some of those differences are that we're seeing in terms of. So I'll be specific. I mean, there are houses across the city that are vacant, but they're not falling apart, so that we're not calling them vacant VBNs. So I actually believe that the vacant property crisis that we're dealing with is actually a lot bigger than what the numbers are saying. And so we have to figure out a way to be able to really capture the universe in order to actually take action in the way that we want to do it. So that's the other reason to bring up that part of the conversation. So I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate folks coming and your crew coming later in the evening for a hearing. But, you know, Mr. Chair and I believe strongly that, you know, the public needs an opportunity to comment and be a part of these hearings as well, which is why we're doing them in the evening. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos. The first agency report is the Law Department. Not here. Okay. Department of Finance.
We don't have a report. I defer to housing.
Perfect. Commissioner Kennedy, you're up.
Good evening, Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner. I'm happy to be here to talk with you on L025-0027, the accuracy of VBN and the non-contiguous TIF. I'm actually going to have my counterpart, Director Moxton, kick us off on the first slide just to ground us with where we are. Next slide.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So the TIF is really the tip of the spear on a $3 billion strategy. And to just refresh everybody on what that strategy is, the city is committing to $300 million over the next 15 years. That is going to go alongside a state commitment of $900 million over the next 15 years. The TIF makes up 150 of the city's $300 million commitment, the other 150 being the reinstatement of the Industrial Development Authority. The state's $900 million commitment is largely made up of what used to be called the Project Core funding that's now been refurbished as the BVRI funding that is guaranteed at a minimum of $50 million a year, which means over 15 years, that's a guarantee of $750 million. And together with Bernie funding, essentially this $900 million is also a very hard commitment. That pairs with philanthropic funding, which we are gathering up from kind of an existing universe of foundations, philanthropies, as well as private entities that are interested in investing, and directing to go hand in hand into the same neighborhoods where the TIF is going, where the BVRI funding is going, so that those dollars are maximized. And so on the front end, that's half the money, that's $1.5 billion that is already engaging and flowing. On the back end, the second $1.5 billion we are working on. The proposals on the table would potentially include things like the city getting a share of the sales tax that's collected within our borders. If those proposals don't pan out as quickly as we want them to, we will continue exploring other options. But the important thing is the money is flowing on the city side, on the state side, on the philanthropic side, and on the private side. And this $150 million TIF and the $65 million that the council authorized in this first tranche that we're launching is that first tip of the spear from the city side to engage this work and get it going.
Excellent. So this is nationally significant legislation. This is what we have come to figure out, that it is the first non-contiguous TIF of its kind in the country. It has an emphasis on that 60 to 80% area median income for affordability. It is broad access. This is also the first TIF of its kind in Baltimore that is not tied to just one or two developers. This TIF, as we stated during the hearings back when we were working with the council to pass the legislation, it is not just one or two developers with a small geographic area. And it's meant to help not just reduce the appraisal gap, but it's also help, the TIF dollars are meant to reduce the appraisal gap, but also create those different levels of affordability and how deeply affordable we would want them to be, and to use those resources. As you all might remember, and for new members of the council, I know that we did brief new members of the council. We had offered a briefing on the TIF and did go over some of the TIF with new members of the council shortly thereafter, the start of this term. But to do a quick overview on the next slide, it does have the non-contiguous TIF map. And just as a reminder, the TIF bonds, the initial ordinance authorizes us to sell an initial $65 million in TIF bonds. It also requires a report prior to the sale of any bond series and geographies, and an updated debt study. And that report was actually delivered to council last week. And I want to thank the team. I should take a minute also just to highlight the team at DHCD, Stacy Freed, executive advisor to the commissioner, as well as Deputy Commissioner Wendy Redfern, and their teams have been working diligently on this in terms of taking it from conception and legislation into what is needed to work with Director Moxton and the finance team, and all of the bond counsel and underwriters and everything to kind of move this forward. And also the data team at DHCD as well. On the next slide, just a reminder, it was kind of data driven. So the map is the map. This is one of those things that has come up in questions previously. And we've gotten some questions from the public, and you may get questions from constituents. The district, what we call the TIF district, is the map. It is citywide because the dots that make up the district are all over the city. And those are the TIF properties, and some properties were used to create the increment needed to repay kind of the first tranche of bonds. And others are on that map because they were either in a high vacancy area, we were leveraging what we could acquire through in-rem or other acquisition methods, or they were already owned by the city. And we also looked at ones that we could utilize to create the increment that were part of a current or planned RFQ or had an open permit as well. On the next slide, just a reminder in terms of the total number of properties in the TIF district itself, over 8,500, with over 4,300 that actually have the potential to benefit from TIF funds at some point. On the next slide, we also provided a summary by council district so that you can see exactly in each council district the number of properties, how many are eligible to receive funds, and what was utilized to help generate some of that increment for that first tranche of bonds. This is also something, just to, on the next slide, reminder, and this has been something that Director Moxton and myself and our staffs have been working diligently on with the bond counsel and the underwriters. Unlike some of the other bonds, like our general obligation bonds, there are very specific federal tax codes and IRS oversight associated with TIF bonds, any TIF bonds. So they're tax exempt. We have to follow those requirements. We have to expect that 85% of the net proceeds from the sale of any tranche of bonds would be spent in 3 years. We have to expect to incur within 6 months of the sale at least 5% of the net sales proceeds, and we have to have some level of due diligence that's required for underwriting purposes before the bonds can be sold. On the next slide, we're going to give you just an update on where we are right now. So the mayor made his announcement. There's been significant media coverage. We anticipate funds to be available in early 2026. We're in that final stage of final underwriting, compliance requirements, Board of Estimates approval, and then would sell the bonds. The portal, application portal officially opened on September 19th. Applications are due October 3rd so that we can complete threshold review and the other components that are needed in order to be able to supply that information for underwriting and to be able to move forward in the next stage of the process. We did submit, on the next slide, just update, we did submit that council report on September 25th. We have a significant amount of public resources that have been available. So we have information up on the website. We also have a dedicated email address, and information can also be found on Mayor Scott's Reframe Baltimore website as well. In terms of the notice of funding opportunity, we've done 3 public information sessions. We've had over 3,000 people registered, over about 1,400 attended those 3. We also did a direct mail postcard to approximately the 4,000 property owners, and we did that mailing not to the address of the vacant building, but we did the mailing to the mail to address and SDAT, so that if you are Mrs. Smith and you own a vacant building on the east side and you live on the west side, we send it to your west side mail to address to let people know that they may, if they want to apply and take advantage of some of the funding or to have information. We can also partner some of those residents also with development partners as well. And we've done direct outreach to some of the community partners, as well as the state BVRI awardees in terms of what properties they have on their state list that also might be available for TIF funds. On the next slide, just a reminder of who can apply. Basically, if you can show that you have site control or some sort of site control and contract, even if it's a contract and the deed, you haven't gone to settlement, and on a property that is in the TIF district, you can apply. We have had some interest from a couple of legacy residents for their properties and helping them forward on that. And the household income cannot exceed, per the regulations, 115%, but we have an emphasis on creating that affordability in the 60 to 80% AMI to close out appraisal gap and create affordability. Just a reminder, on the next slide, we're emphasizing again, you have to be in the TIF property, must be approved in the TIF district as a DOT. We created a searchable database for everybody to use. It's available on the website as well, green dot means that you're eligible, and we'll be double checking that through threshold review, et cetera. So applications are in our Neighborly application portal. We need that application by October 3rd at 5 p.m. That is the link for that. And then in terms of some of the questions that people have asked on the next slide, talking about, we don't have a maximum of funds per property, because we need to see what is your appraisal gap and how deeply affordable are you looking to have that property. Will we cover the entire cost of the renovation? No. We make it clear that it's for the appraisal gap and how affordable the property would be. When we did and have done math on this with Director Moxton and modeling last year, we did an average of 50,000 because that's what we see typically with our most recent developer incentives and what we're using that for. All of the funds are reimbursable, and this is TIF required, right? They are grants, they are not loans, and they are reimbursable. You do not have to complete the project before you can submit. So you can submit, for reimbursement as you're doing some of the work. We wanted to make that easy for some of our grantees and being able to work with them, especially our small and emerging developers or residents that are looking to apply and work forward. And we do want to see that use and occupancy permit within 12 months from the executed grant agreement. On the next slide, you'll see this is only for those hard construction costs, right? So it's reimbursing for the demolition, excavation, heating, cooling, et cetera. You do also have to have an inspection, like a third-party inspection done as normally would happen with like a 203K or construction loan to help just ensure that the work was completed and it was in line with your cost estimates and your budget for that work. And it's a fairly easy reimbursement process. You have that inspection, you submit the reimbursement, DHCD looks at it, it goes over to MuniCap, they review it, and then it goes to the finance department and they cut the check. Janelle Rogers cuts the check right out of the special treasury account for the TIF. So it actually can move smoothly as long as we get the proper information. A lot of times what we've seen on other TIFs, or the larger TIFs, it gets held up when you're trying to slide costs in that you're not supposed to put reimbursement for. We are completing that threshold review. So it's the administrative check. We have to just make sure there's accuracy, and we are providing an opportunity for curing if they're missing documents. On the next slide is actually the reimbursement process that I just described. I kind of jumped ahead in terms of the slides. And then we do require reporting. So they'll need to have quarterly reports that the grantees will have to submit detailed information about the project. And we also have to confirm the rental income absolutely does not exceed the 115%, but we also have to ensure that the household income or the rental income meets whatever they put in their application and what the affordability was for that specific property in the 60 to 80% range, or it could be deeper than 60% as well, which we anticipate potentially some will be, especially if our land trust partners apply for any of the TIF funds as well to help close those gaps. So that completes the presentation and update that we had for today on the non-contiguous TIF. The team has been providing some technical assistance. We've had conversations with different development partners and applicants. There's a significant number of applicants already started in the portal, and I think just under 45 that have been officially completed by now. But I can't give any more information on that at that time.
Perfect. Colleagues, what we'll do is we'll do questions and comments on this section first, then allow Commissioner to go into the next. I just don't want to make sure we don't conflate the issues together. I just want to keep it clean, and also it makes it easier for my brain this late at night. So, Commissioner, I just want to first start by saying that as a person who believes firmly in equity in the city, I'm thankful for the criteria. It was one of the things and reasons why I support the legislation last term, because ultimately I'm in a place where I have a district that has been redlined, but I also, from looking at the master plans, and I inherited a lot of them. My residents want to own a home. They look like me and they say they want to actually own property in the city, and then there's some who want to rent. There's also the factor that we're trying to attract new residents. So the 60 to the 80% AMI to me is a good sweet spot. I say that because there are a lot of people who are not in that 20 to 30, that 40 or 50 range that we've been making all the affordable housing for thus far. There are people that we're gonna have to get to that 60 and 80% range, because our partners in DC now, we have people who are qualifying for Section 8 vouchers at $70,000 and $80,000 a year. And we're having development properties built so that they can actually be able to price in. And I'm happy that this TIF is addressing that now so that we don't price out those residents who have done well enough to not live as much paycheck to paycheck, but they have an opportunity to own. So for me, my question is, how is the city measuring whether the TIF funds are reaching the historically disinvested communities? And how will we monitor that? Because I see that map as a large portion of my district, and I just want to make sure that my disinvested communities, and whether you be a 20-year resident who's owned your home, get access to it, or as I've seen in my district, it is Black and brown developers who are developing my district. How do they get access, and how do they make sure they get access to it? So I just want to make sure we're keeping our eyes on who is banging and betting on West Baltimore right now.
That's a great question. So one of the ways that the district itself was created, especially the properties that are eligible to receive funds, is that they were in a historically disinvested area. And we also have seen that that's a significant amount of the outreach that we have, also with the development partners that we have on the developer registry, as well as a number of our smaller emerging developers, minority developers, women-owned developers, working with them to evaluate what properties they own that are in the TIF district to make sure that they're eligible. There was a meeting, Deputy Commissioner Redfern and Stacy Freed had a meeting. Yes, that was yesterday? Yeah, sorry. It's Tuesday. That was yesterday with all of the developer registry RFQ members, as well as we've been having other meetings and reaching out through developers. A significant number of the questions and people that we had in, I would say, the information sessions were our smaller emerging developers, as well as some of the residents that we find. I would say one thing is that if you know of anybody, if there's an address that is on the TIF district list, and you know that there is a family member that is tied to that property or owns that property, or it's their aunt's property, we would want to know about that sooner than later to also help. That's one reason why we tried. That's part of the outreach that's the hardest, especially if they don't live clearly at that property address, but they might not be the one that's on the deed, but they know, like, that's my grandmother's house, and it's in a weird probate or something. We want to try to attract those people and find them, and that's one of the harder things to do with this type of program.
Perfect. So just to connect this to BVRI, I know that the governor announced technical assistance through philanthropy for persons. Are we willingly or assisting them to get connected to that actual technical assistance as well? Because if we're truly about building and investing in Baltimore, and we know that Baltimoreans want to do it, how do we make sure they have just a level playing field with someone who may be an outside investor?
The technical assistance that was announced was specific for the BVRI awardees, not for the general public at this time. I think that they are looking at how to use some of that technical assistance to increase capacity for other developers. And to do that, we do some work with Enterprise that they've done some work with some local developers as well as developers in the faith-based community to provide technical assistance. MC Bittner kind of leads our coordination with Enterprise, and we think that that's another potential route for someone to take on the technical assistance. But right now, the technical assistance fund is specific to the BVRI awardees.
I figured that would be the answer. So here's another question. So for a number of persons, since we're going to 80% AMI, have we thought about connecting them with our CDFIs to get them some technical support in terms of financing too? Because they actually have funds for 80% AMI. And if we're trying to stay there, we need to make sure that we are, and I hate to say this, hand-holding people, because if they're successful, we're successful, the city's successful. I just want to make sure that, have we thought that through too?
We have thought of that. There's actually been conversations in a partnership with NIF, one of our CDFIs, in partnership with one of the developers or a couple of developers around the Parkview Recreation Center, and partnering and using NIF and a loan program with them and technical assistance for the construction components. Right now, DHCD also has a Fuse fellow that is working on the other, what I would say is another side, which is the pipeline of renters to homeownership, and doing some work on putting together a program to also create the technical assistance and kind of wrap around homeownership coaching that's needed. So you have the coaching and kind of technical assistance on the development side, and then there's also technical assistance for people that want to be homeowners that are currently renters and how to move them through. So we've been looking at both.
So here's a follow-up question, because I knew you were going to say that too. Have we looked to our former sister agency, HABC, about persons who are using housing choice vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, who can cash them in for $30,000 and buy a home in Baltimore City? Because if my memory serves me right, a large portion of the population that left my district received those vouchers, went to Baltimore and Howard County. How do we attract those residents back so that they own in the neighborhoods they formerly lived in? And how are we going to provide them that assistance too? Because we do use our block grant funding to actually fund a number of people to do homeowner
counseling.
Yes, housing counseling. It's escaping me this late. I think that we need to tighten that up, because if my memory serves me from HABC and conversations, they only had 18 residents that actually went through that process out of thousands.
I think it could be less in a year, actually, that we've even seen over the years. So HABC has its own separate program and counseling program for residents that want to utilize the homeownership, the choice homeownership program. And I think that it is, and it has historically been one of the more difficult programs to have people go through. There's a lot that start the program and then drop out. They necessarily don't use the housing counseling agencies, and that's why we actually need homeownership coaching, which is what the Fuse Fellow is working on, because the housing counseling really is just a check on a box, and it isn't the level of coaching that's needed. HABC's program is more of a coaching program, but they do have difficulty attracting residents and moving residents through that. And I think it's a question that we've brought up with Director Abrahams previously, and would continue to explore that with them on how to better take advantage of the resources that they have and how to have people use that program.
Perfect. Nina, here comes my committee request. I would like to have a conversation with our federal delegation as well as our lobbyists to the federal government to discuss the partnership between HABC and DCHD so that we can further that pipeline, because I firmly believe that our federal partners should assist us with this, because then that leads to more people moving back to the city of Baltimore and strengthening our tax base. And with that being said, I'll yield to Vice Chair Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An upcoming hearing that we're having on the quality of some of our high-rise apartments and stuff too will need a conversation with HABC as well. So I'll follow up on that separately. I just have a couple of questions just to clarify. My understanding when we first were talking about this was that it was still a reimbursement because the increment from a rehabbed house between the amount of the tax revenue when it was vacant versus when it gets rehab is going into the fund that would then pay off the bonds. That's the increment. And then that fund, once, you know, there's all of this bond money. So there's, so it sounds like initially we were thinking about that average 50,000 that would come kind of after the rehab. We were thinking about it. Now you've clarified, and this is what I want to clarify.
Yeah.
That you're not limiting the amount. It cannot be the entire rehab, but it is part of the package and is not waiting until after the the use and occupancy. It can be something that comes as the rehab is coming. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that, my apologies if that wasn't clear, because that's been the intent, the entire program, is that the funds are used on the construction side. Originally, we actually wanted to be able to front some of the funding, which we do with some of our other loans and grant program. But due to the IRS tax code components, we can't use this as a loan, and we can't provide any of it up front.
Okay.
And then in order to make it more accessible and easier to use than some of the other products and funding sources out on the street, we wanted to ensure that we could have certain thresholds in so that you could still submit for reimbursement, because a lot of the construction costs for the TIF are some of those costs that are going to be happening early on in the process.
Right, okay.
And so we can be able to get and support that level, and they can submit up to the 90% of the construction costs, and then we're still holding some at use and occupancy permit and sale or rent.
So,
and we don't need, like, there's two separate issues. The reimbursement doesn't have anything to do with the increment that's needed to repay the bonds.
Agreed. Sorry, I confused the issue. I was trying to just make sure that it was clear what we were talking about. But you are yes, I understand. So the increment doesn't. You're not. The grant isn't provided to you based on the increment. That's not the issue.
Exactly.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Sorry to confuse the issue. And so I guess my question is that, you know, we do have an issue, which will come up in the next part of the hearing, around folks not getting that use and occupancy and still being able to transfer the property, which we've tried to address for a long time. Is the department going to be tracking to make sure that permits are being used, that they go through all the process, and that at the end of the day, we have a property that can be transferred, or if it's not transferred, it's actually owned by that same person, but that it has a VBN on it. So, a use and occupancy on it, so that we know that has all of the health and safety standards in the home.
Yeah. They have to pull permits. It's part of the monitoring. It's part of the work out of Deputy Commissioner Redfern's team. It's also going to be part of the quarterly reporting component. And being able to see where those permits are, as well as, you know, they can go up to 90% for reimbursement, but you can't get that last 10%. of your grant money until you have your use and occupancy permit, and then that's like another 5, and then the other 5 on time of sale or rent.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, is
Yeah.
kind of what that,
There's a little bit of
that piece is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's what we want to make sure happens.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then can you explain the difference between the two applications? So there's the application that's going in now, which I think is sort of to be able to show the bondholders that there's interest and capacity to do this. And then there will be a separate application for that same person to go back in and say, here's all my costs, can you do this? Can you explain the two?
There's one application, so they're doing the majority of the application right now, and we'll use that for threshold review. And then as the grant agreement is created, there may be, edits or changes. As we do with any application, you get the application, and then as you're working through the grant agreement process and kind of final review, you double check, your budgets, your line item budget. They can make edits on the line item budget at that point. We can adjust. We're not going to be awarding funds out of this application process, but there is not a second application process that's needed.
Okay, so folks let's say, just making this up, that we have 300 applicants. We're gonna have way more, but I'm just using that now. And so you've identified the number of properties and the types of, and the properties that they are going to be rehabbing. And then, you're monitoring through the situation. As they're doing the work, they are also working on a grant agreement. And then because they may not have all the costs like right up front.
No, so they'll enter into a grant agreement before any work starts.
Got it, okay.
I take that back. There may be an instance where work has started, actually, and they can enter into a grant agreement.
Right, there might be some people doing some work now.
That's already,
saying.
that's already started, and that could enter into a grant agreement. It's not as work goes. So the grant agreement would cover the properties that they're ready to move on. So if that grant agreement, if they are ready to do 5 properties, and then the budget for each property, one property might need 70,000 and one property might need 50 and one might need 80 and one need whatever. The grant agreement would be for those 5 properties. There would be a separate budget for each property, and then the grant agreement would be executed for, all 5 of those properties at once. And then they go do their work, and then they submit their requisitions for reimbursement.
So I'm assuming that all, again, just making this up, 300 already have site control?
They have some form of site control. So site control
It could be an LDA, it could be a contract,
it could be a contract, it could be you're waiting on your judgment from private tax sale.
Sure.
You already own the property, it's your grandmother's property, and you're, working to try to get it in your name, and we want to go ahead and make sure that we get you part of this first tranche. But you have to be able to show some level of site control or an award letter of property that we're working on with you. If, it's not just
Right,
the
because
execute.
sometimes you have your letters of intent and you're waiting on the negotiation so that it's very clear that to everybody involved that this property is going to that particular person. And so that would count in this particular instance. So all of that would be happening at the same time. Okay, that makes sense, because that, there's so many to still acquire through NREM, which I'm happy about where that's going. And then, making sure that people, so this first tranche is really for that, as we work on more acquisitions and those, and getting that out there for the next tranche. So we can kind of see how that's working. Okay. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate the clarity. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to ask a couple questions, and I think you've probably answered or alluded to some of them, but I just want to make sure I understand. So how many awards are we expecting to give out in this first, this award cycle?
I can't answer that question at this time.
So if all the applications meet the standard, then we're, like, if all the applications meet whatever standards you're looking at, then they would all be awarded?
I can't answer that question at this time because we don't know and can't talk about the total amount of the bond offering that will end up going out on the street. So we don't know at this time how much money we will actually net. That's why it's called a notice of funding opportunity and not a notice of funding availability.
So when will we have that answer?
November? December?
The answer is dependent on market factors, which is why we can't speak to it now. We will be able to speak to it once we go to the market, which will be in December.
Okay, so you'll get all these applications, and then you'll go to the bond market, however that works, in December. And then, assuming that the investors buy the bonds, then you can begin awarding them? Okay. So at some point in the spring, like early 26, then we'd be able to...
Very early 26.
Very early.
We're intending to make the money available pretty much instantly as soon as we've gone to market. So we're aiming for very, very early 26.
Okay. And will the information will become publicly available once?
As soon as we've made the bond sale. Yeah, the only reason we can't speak to it now is because speaking to it would affect the sale itself.
Okay. Okay.
So colleagues, I just want to be clear. We can't speak in hypotheticals because we don't know the variables that will be decided based off of what the applications were. So they have to be evaluated, then those persons have to be evaluated for underwriting, and then we can go to the market. That's why I wanted to make sure that we had the presentation speak to it, because we just can't speculate. I just want to make sure that I would say that we limit our questions to what things that we know factor, like strategy in terms of getting people interested in coming in to apply, strategy interested in trying to get people matching financing. So once they do qualify, how do we help them close that gap?
Yeah.
I would say that because with bond markets, you have to be very specific, and the data that will be provided to everyone will be based off of underwriting, and then we'll go from there. That will then entail the amount of money that we have available. So I just want to just level the playing field again, so that's why this is just an initial conversation, because within, as you saw in the schedule, we're back here in February with them. After, more than likely, they will have the underwriting and have those firm numbers, so we can come back and have that conversation too. And I think for that hearing, we can have a conversation about how to support the marketing of this too, because ultimately, once people get those bond dollars, we got to put people in those buildings. And we have to be clear about putting people in those vacant, I'm going to say buildings, because we pray that they will no longer be vacant by the end of 2026, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm trying to make sure that we're all level set. So when we explain this to our community members, they understand that this is the process. And then come next spring, we'll have firm numbers, firm applicants, and a process to move forward in terms of supporting those people.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Although this was helpful for clarifying for me what you probably spent some time explaining earlier in the conversation anyway. The bond market stuff is confusing to me. Okay, so that all is helpful. Next question. How do you, and this specifically for Commissioner Kennedy, like when will we know that this is working or is not working?
I would probably check in with my colleague, Director Moxton, but I think that we know it's working now. Just because of, we have historically seen positive outcomes from our developer incentive programs that have been administered by the Development Division, and this is modeled off of that. We know that we have appraisal gap, and we know that we have an affordability gap that needs to be covered. And we know that we have properties that the city owns that we're selling to our very capable, excited, eager, small and emerging developer group out there. And I think that I would be confident to say that it's already working. Plus, we've already had positive feedback
I get
from
you.
our underwriters.
Better question here. So is it fair to say that we are, like, I'm just gonna make up a number. There's 100 of them that get awarded or whatever. Then we would see at least 100 more use and occupancies issued in the time period after it's awarded than we would in what we've seen this year
That's right.
and in 24.
I think that's fair. And there's one very big way that we will be tracking this, and then a lot of small ways on top of that. And that big way is new use and occupancy permits. This approach that we're taking to the TIF is based on tranches. We launched the TIF using criteria that included buildings that had a VBN up to within the last 2 years of when the legislation was passed. That's why there's 8,500 addresses in the total district, but only 4,500 are eligible for funds. That means they still have a VBN. There's about 4,000 that are actually already basically fixed or in the process of being fixed, and those are already producing tax revenue, and those make up the revenue base that is supporting this first tranche. What we're looking for is for this tranche to create a bunch of houses with real people that are paying taxes after they get their use and occupancy that is going to let us do a second tranche. That is the biggest sign of success. And then that second tranche is going to let us do a third tranche. That third tranche is going to let us do a fourth tranche. That's how we get to 150 million. That approach was how we intend to stay safe as a city in getting to 150 million as we sort of go step by step. So that's the biggest way is, yes, it's going to create UNOs. And it's going to create UNOs specifically at these addresses, and it's going to create tax increment specifically at these addresses.
Yeah, so there's the increase in UNOs, and then there's the actual paying off the bonds, yeah. And so that I'm understanding.
I want to make sure we get the specifics of this right, just in case there's anyone kind of technical listening. The bonds are being paid off by houses that have already had their UNOs and are already producing increment. I'm being very precise about that because the bonds that we're putting out now are extremely safe. They are backed by tax increment that exists already and exists in amounts that greatly exceed the debt service that we actually need. But these new houses that are going to get their UNOs are going to produce new increment that will allow us to do a tranche 2.
Yep, I did know that. Thank you, though. I definitely asked that question wrong. And then lastly, the city is authorized to I guess, for this first round of awards to be up to $60 million.
65.
65, and that could happen right away.
The legislation that the council passed gives authority up to 65 million. The tranches that we're working on are going to not necessarily be that amount. That's part of the
Sure.
sizing that we're doing with the
Sure.
market. But yeah, the authority that exists under current law is up to 65
Yeah,
million.
and it could be done as several rounds, or it could be,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Jones?
And you touched on, quick question, and you can be brief, but you touched on it a little bit, but if we can go a little deeper into like the process of how a house is selected, I realize it's kind of specific, not necessarily to an area or community, but like this house is eligible versus even the house next door. Like just kind of that nuances. I know the overall what makes, kind of an area.
So there was a lot of analysis done in terms of the concentration of vacant properties, how many on the block. We looked at also what was in the in-rem pipeline. So it might be that the one next door was not in-rem eligible, but this one was. We also reviewed the TIF addresses with a number of our community partners as well. And depending upon the community partner and the community development partner, there was decisions not to have two, in some instances it was to not have two affordable right next to each other, but to kind of stagger and do some other things. So there were a multitude of different decision points and analysis, not just on DHCD's part, but also in partnership with community that went into these conversations.
Thank you for that clarification. The follow-up question, is there a process for a property to be considered? Or later on that may have slipped through the cracks or that
No.
may be proposed? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and my second question, I know we created a system in which someone could get access to the funds while they're going through construction, correct?
There is, we have to be somewhat thoughtful and careful on that, and it depends on what stage they're at in construction. But yes, if they have a grant agreement from us, if they've been awarded and they have a grant agreement, they can get reimbursed during their construction process. They do not have to wait until the very end and wait until it's sold or rented to get a lump sum of money.
And I understand being thoughtful in that and why that process was created. I guess the purpose of my question is if you can explain to me any guardrails that may be put in place where some folks who, may choose, rather than finish the property, I'll just take this free money and keep it moving.
Yeah. So A, the use and occupancy permit. B, not all of the money is available. So we do have some of that 10% retainage at use and occupancy, 5% at use and occupancy and 5% at sale in there. And then there's other specific language in the grant agreement itself that the law department and our outside counsel have put in around, some of those guardrails.
So that if they don't finish, they could still be on the hook for the city or something like that?
Potentially they could be on the hook, but in some ways it depends on the situation, right? If they don't finish for some reason and the property sells to someone that we're aware of and then they finish it, the framing was done. And, we can also see about affordability at that point. So, we do have some guardrails in place from the grant agreement and then also retainage.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, the grant agreement's attached to the property, not the persons.
The grant agreement is attached to the person.
Thank you. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure to clarify because people may think that it's the property, not the person. I just want to, thank you. Any other question, colleagues?
Well, one other one, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
And as far as the time period, I noticed it said like a year to get a use and occupancy. Is that, okay, and I guess if they don't do it within a year, what would that kind of follow-up look like? Just the.
We have a question with them to see how far off. Did they have a financing situation? Can we help them along? Was there a problem? So sometimes, we do work with them to get them a couple more months and move forward. And then I forget what the specifics in the grant agreement covers for that
Okay.
time period.
I was just more, is there anything, because some people may not even have the the will, the want to? Is there anything we can do to kind of encourage them to kind of make them do it besides just supporting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if, like we do now in terms of compliance on properties that have been sold, like there's questions about, you know, sometimes to move them along, we start to look at receivership proceedings or other code enforcement to help
Push them along. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. We're going to move into the VDN discussion. Thank you, Commissioner Kennedy. I'm going to bring the presentation back up for
Oh,
you.
yes. Yeah, we are now on to accuracy of VBOs.
Yes.
Okay.
Moving us along, we are now at 7:26.
All right, so we have 34 minutes. So accuracy, we have one slide here that we thought, we wanted to have a conversation, I think, with you all as a committee about this. You know, we have Deputy Hessler, Deputy Booker, as well as his team as well, just talking about issuing vacant building notices. We thought this is something that we've looked at with Rebuild Metro. They did a study. We felt in this forum it would be something good to share with members of the committee as well as the public in terms of Rebuild Metro actually conducted on the ground study and looked at houses in 6 neighborhoods that had some overlap and looked at, you know, what they were seeing visually on the ground with where we had VBNs. And their findings in their study was that there was not a statistically significant difference between those vacant properties and the VBNs, indicating that the most severe, you know, of the vacant properties are definitely being captured and issued the vacant building notice. We know that there are properties that are unoccupied across the city. We've looked and had multiple conversations about the unoccupied properties. I'm going to have my colleagues and deputies talk a little bit more about some of the thresholds on the vacant building notices. I will say that one of the things that has had the city be successful in our legal proceedings, whether or not that be receivership or condemnation or tax lien foreclosure, in rem foreclosure, has been our vacant building notice and the vacant building notice definition and the application of that definition and thresholds in our work from a legal standpoint that has been able to have us hold up in court when it comes to due process and property rights. And it is something that both Deputy Hessler and Deputy Booker have presented on and are considered to be national experts on at a yearly conference of code enforcement managers across the country, talking, you know, in terms of using this as examples for other jurisdictions that don't have any type of definition like this or have no formal way of being able to count vacant building notices. So the work that has happened over the years has been great in terms of getting us a solid legal foundation, being able to use those legal tools and have those definitions that have held up in court when potentially challenged. And I think that that's very important when we look at those thresholds and what we're looking at. Not to say that we do recognize that there are unoccupied properties, and those unoccupied properties are all in different varying shapes and sizes of consideration that they have with them. Some they're well maintained, they're unoccupied. In some instances, the neighbors are doing some good Samaritan items that are keeping the property, you know, to the below the threshold of a vacant building notice. In other instances, there, you know, someone actually hires a company to kind of mow and do some things on the outside, and they just have an unoccupied property. So we do recognize that that is out there. We've had conversations with the I-team, with Director Smith, Terrence Smith, and the I-team. They're looking at part of this as well on their prevention side of vacants and also how we can get to some of these unoccupied as well as some of the occupied on the prevention side and seeing things. So ultimately, we wanted to have that conversation. We issue vacant building. We are not afraid to just issue vacant building notices. Like if the property is meeting the threshold and, you know, in there, and the team, if it's on a border, we also try to push it because that does unlock tools in our toolbox, right? And so, you know, we'll drive around, we all call, like, hey, check this one, it doesn't have a VBN, I think it needs a VBN, we need, you know, and I would make this argument from that standpoint. So that's my opening statement on that, which is we have thresholds. Those thresholds help us from a legal standpoint. We do have unoccupied properties. And I don't know that lowering the threshold will actually help us on those unoccupied. But there are other things that we can think of and try to utilize there. And I didn't know if Deputy Hessler, Deputy Booker wanted to follow up with any just overall kind of definitions on the thresholds for the council or the public.
Just from a definition standpoint, mainly for the public, because I think the council members here we've had these discussions many times over the years and are very familiar with it, but for the public, in order for a property to get a vacant building notice, it must be unoccupied and then unsafe or unfit in some way. And unsafe or unfit could be that the property is open to casual entry, that it is boarded, that it has damage that makes it unsafe or unfit, that the inspector can see from the outside or from aerial imagery or, you know, other means. There is also a second way that a property can be deemed and issued a vacant building notice. That came about maybe 2010, 2011, sometime around there. And it was specifically designed to address the mortgage foreclosure crisis that the nation was facing at the time, and what can be referred to as zombie properties, where it's an unoccupied property that is rotting from the inside out. And so the inspector on the curb looking at the property, it's intact, it's not open to casual entry, it hasn't been boarded, there's no damage that's visible today, and then tomorrow the roof collapses or a window falls out or something of that nature. And in order to meet the qualifications for that, the property has to be unoccupied and determined to be a nuisance. And that nuisance is defined in the code as having 2 or more code violations that have gone unabated 10 days beyond the expiration date, which in most cases is 40 days after issuance. Or it could have 6 property maintenance citations within a 12-month period. So, you know, those 6 have to be on separate occasions. It can't be that we show up on Tuesday and issue 6 citations and then declare it a nuisance vacant on Wednesday. It needs to be 6 separate occasions where we've gone out, and those citations have to reach the point where they can't be appealed any longer. So they're final citations. Either the person is paid or they've gone into default because it's been 90 days since issuance. So that's what I had to assist with this. Chief, do you have any?
I have nothing to add to that.
Thank you. Thank you for this discussion. I want to just let the committee know that I've been working and I've talked with DHCD about this. We don't have alignment quite yet, but wanting to really be clear and kind of label and not create because it's already there, but really try to figure out how we can properly monitor what this pre-vacant, what I call pre-vacant looks like, because it doesn't have a VBN yet, but it's empty and it's going to be on its way, right? I mean, Miss Faye's house, and because of what's happening with some of these other challenges with taking advantage of folks and all that, I have very specific addresses, but I'm not going to say what they are. But I think that the commissioner, both deputy commissioner and the commissioner, know what they are because we've talked about them. But they are, they've been empty for a really, really long time. but the porch hasn't fell down yet. It fell down yet. The neighbors are taking care of the yard, as the commissioner said. But they're going to be vacant at some point in time to get that VBN. In the meantime, they are that nuisance. So I wanted to try to figure out how we can, what are the other criteria we need to add to nuisance so that we can really take action on it. And frankly, NREM 2 does take action on those once we pass that NREM 2 bill. But I also wanted to just talk about, some of the other things relative to not just the definition of VBN, but also, and I understand the legal part. When I was at One House at a Time, we worked hard on that as well, and because I was actually part of that conversation back in the day, but which wasn't that far back in the day, but it was a while ago. And so. What I want to just try to figure out is that we have several residents who call 311 all the time and often are just frustrated because they can't get, a VBN on, because we're teaching people how to use CodeMap to be able to see, the red diamond, which is different from the fire department's red diamond, different conversation for another day, not today, but, so that we know that that's there. So I guess I'm just asking, and this might be for the code enforcement folks, because I've been out with my inspector in my neighborhoods, and there's a particular house where it's boarded up on one side, but it's not boarded up on another, but I can't get a vacant building notice on it. So what's and I know we do the notices to give people an opportunity, but it's empty. It's not, we need some action on this property and want to relieve the neighbors from having to be the ones to pay for somebody to mow the lawn. So I'm just trying to figure out, if you could maybe say, Deputy Commissioner Booker, about, what the inspectors are really seeing out there to really make that VBN, especially since there's some of them, like the one in my district that I talk about all the time, the porch is now starting to fall down, and I still cannot get a VBN on that property.
Okay, so thank you, Councilwoman. My inspector team is guided by the definition that's in the Building Fire and Related Code of Baltimore City. As Deputy Hessler mentioned, unoccupied is the first thing. Unfit for human habitation and not safe. The thing that I would question in this particular case that you mentioned, that one side is boarded and the other side is not. I'd like to know what that address is so that I could unpack that. Because usually if something is boarded, while the code requires you to have one means of egress on a dwelling, we usually will issue a vacant building notice if something is boarded, okay? So I'd like to know what that is. A window.
It's a window in this case.
Oh, well, so that's different. So, when you have, there are other items within the code that we can use, like that would be a defective window as opposed to going straight to a vacant building notice. When we look at the definition, we are governed by that definition. Unfit, unsafe. Safe usually implies structural integrity issues. Unfit, the systems inside don't work, heating, plumbing, so forth. But a broken window that's boarded to keep somebody out would be a defective window. We probably wouldn't cite that for a vacant building at that particular time.
I think that, like the commissioner said, I'm interested in adding VBNs simply so that we can use all the tools needed. It's not to punish anybody, it's just to be able to use all the tools. And so I appreciate that. I think that it would be valuable if my colleagues haven't been out with their inspectors to really see, because I think that's eye-opening. And we have talked about this issue of lowering the threshold, which I understand. That's why I think about, creating a separate class. But let's talk about commercial properties too. Commercial properties are hard to get VBNs on because you don't have the same criteria. You don't have the high grass and weeds in most cases. Somebody might fix the window, but the back looks bad. I'm grateful that we finally got a lot of VBNs on Greenmount, which I had been asking for. And I think that that's been difficult for those of us who have Main Street areas to be able to take action on folks that aren't doing anything with those properties. And so the threshold of not unfit for habitation is important, but wouldn't you agree that if a building has a bunch of graffiti that nobody's taking care of, that there's, might be some, maybe, minor damage, but it's definitely, damage, that's something that we should be able to take action on? Because right now we can't take action on it. Like the DPW won't clean private property. So I'm just trying to, we have a lot of vacant, commercial buildings, and we want to be able to take action on them. And that $1,000 citation, which we've worked on, is going to be helpful. So can you walk through what that criteria is for like a commercial property? And if there's more that maybe we can do to educate our residents to go ahead and do like more 311s or whatever it takes.
So I just want to, I'm going to turn back to the deputies here in a second. I just want to clarify on some of that. So, what right now is considered to be a vacant like storefront that is not being rented, but does not qualify for a vacant building notice, because overall the property is in fairly decent condition. We do have a graffiti issue, and there's a building that I can think of in the Main Street in my neighborhood that is covered in graffiti. Supposedly it's been leased. Supposedly a business is going to go into there. But then there's also the one next door to it that's been vacant now for 6 years. So I just want to clarify that is the type of structure that you're talking about at this point. Okay. Team?
Well, yeah, so the definition applies the same. And I like to get away from, distinguishing when it comes to my team, they're property maintenance code enforcement inspectors, not just housing or commercial, it's property, period, right? So the definition as it is laid out in the building fire and related codes when it speaks to vacant building is the same standard, same criteria. The things that you mentioned, and I can clearly see them in my neighborhood as well, they are all items that we could cite with an individual notice because it doesn't reach the level of a vacant building. So if that is the desire to go in that direction, it has to be some modification to the language in the code, in the definition for us to get there.
Okay, I want to say that I think that all of our inspectors are phenomenal. I really have worked with a lot of them, and the ones in my district I think are very good. Where I'm just trying to get at the definitions because they're guided by the definitions.
That's
so I want to be super clear about that.
Yeah, Councilwoman, I want to thank you for that, and that's why I had this team come out this evening, because they do that hard work of, so far this year, over 113,000 inspections, responded to over 52,000 service requests, and they got boots on the ground every day with minimal resources, but we're continuing to grow our capacity. So thank you for those kind of words.
Well, and I think that we had asked very specifically a couple of years ago to ramp up the proactivity also to try to get more VBNs and the $1,000 citations. So we have been seeing that in the data. So I just want to be clear about that. Well, we've seen the citations in the data. But I want to just get to understand, because I think that this issue of the VBN is extremely important for our strategy. And I don't want to leave properties behind that really do need, that to be there. I mean, just look at the springtime, right? You can just go to my district, I'll just use my district as an example. You can go down the street and you can see all this high grass and weeds in May. That's likely a property that is unoccupied, not always, I agree with that, but is likely and is gonna need some attention at some point. And we're gonna have to look at that list and try to modify and try to figure that out.
And I would say that I think definitely separating the conversation a little bit between the commercially zoned buildings that have vacant storefronts that for whatever reason are not being rented, whether or not the rent is too high, whether or not.
Well, we're working on a bill to address those vacant storefronts, so.
And that would come into play on some of the properties that you're talking about is, because that necessarily, like Deputy Booker was saying, that threshold isn't there. There might be a significant amount of graffiti. It might not be occupied as a retail location, but it hasn't met a threshold in terms of unsafe or, inability to get its use and occupancy permit, et cetera. So.
And my last question before I hand it off to my colleagues who have questions. I just received the budget list that I had asked for during the budget, and it's fine, I got it now. I haven't looked at the list yet of the properties that have been sold to folks that are fully rehabbed but don't have, that need the use and occupancy. I'm super concerned about those folks, and can you talk a little bit about where we are in helping them get through the process to get their UNO prior to getting them, we get the big property
Yeah, I can. So we created a special form for them. We also identified the staff person. It was going to be Alicia in the staff. That would be the point person to help people through.
Who is going to be that person? You will let us know by email? Or?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can. So we have that person identified. We have the form created. We did not send the form out, and we did not do that. We put a hold on it because that same person was involved in working through the volume of permits that we had in the last several months. So we didn't want to send something out and not be able to address their issue at that time. So now that we're leveling out on the permit, and that is actually leveling, and I think that's a good word for it, leveling out. What is coming in is going out. In terms of data, we will be going back, but we have a specific form that we created. We have the contact person. We have the list of addresses. We have the letter drafted. We have everything ready. We just did not pull the trigger on mailing it because we didn't want to not be able to provide the service and trying to overload while we're just working through at that point.
Thank you.
Okay, there'll be funding available to help those folks if they need it?
We have some. It still has some income restrictions. The funding that we do have does have income restrictions. So we have to see, I think, what is needed in the properties, and it depends on the property, what level of potential funding they might need in order to get their UNO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So I have very straightforward questions because all of my issues with VBNs lie in different warehouses right now. All right, where shall we start? One, thanks to her question, I want to know how often VBN list is audited and by whom to make sure that we are being very clear about what it looks like, because I recognize two things by data. The men and women who sit behind you in that front row and their teams are inundated with not only sanitation issues, but also the standard code enforcement. There's only so much work that can be done in a day. So I think that we need to think about how do we audit it too, because if I already know that a property has a VBN and we know, I'll give you an example. I could tell you 75 properties in my district that more than likely needs to be cut by somebody's agency, and it has to come from your people ahead of time, right? But we never even do clean stack, schedule it the way it is because there's always a property that's missing. And then while they're trying to deal with serious issues between like bed bugs and people having places to safely live, they have to go back out, measure grass to say that this thing needs to be cut, and then hope that an agency can get to it. And then we have to repeat this process every month, go back out and again and again. And the data tells me that they're spending a lot of time on sanitation rather than going after what we can get on things related to VPNs, right? So my question is, how do we audit it? And then how do we build capacity so we can go back through that list so that we can provide them some reprieve to actually address the issues that are related to VBNs, because I'm gonna be transparent with you. Often, they go to places of VBN, there's someone may be living there, they didn't have to send it over to Nicole Hart to get that person assistance with some of the issues that have been addressed on citations. So there's a lot that your staff is going through, and I'm just trying to figure out how we adapted to all that complexity related to VBN, and how we audit it to make sure that we can deal with that capacity efficiently.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I want to react to one thing that you said with regard to something has to be seen by us before it can be cut. Yeah, I want the record to reflect that if a vacant building notice is on a property, you do not need a work order from us to go cut it. It has already been cleared for cutting. It's just that the process has been get the inspector to put a work order on it for the other agency to react. But it should be known that if the notice is there, my team has given government clearance to take whatever agency action needs to be taken. The clearance is there because the vacant building notice is on that respective property.
Can I hold you right there? That's not what's happening on our side of it, experiencing it, because we have to send 311s for your people to visually see it. So Nina, this goes back to that question. We have 6 agencies that cut grass, right? We have control of property, city schools. I can tell you by a map every year on Wednesday that Drew Hill Park is being cut. You know why? I drive by and I see the company cutting it. I can tell you each time my median is cut for transportation. But when it relates to anything with a VBN or high grass and weeds, and we know the property is vacant, we know it has the thing that he just said, I still have to tell a resident to file a 311 and my office files it. So I think this is something we need to have the innovation team to address. And this is why I want to have that hearing, because that is what we've heard, but that is not what's happening. And I am sick and tired of being sick and tired of having people to file another 311 every month to get the same property on Linden, the same property on Drew Park Lake Drive cut that have VBNs. And I think this is where reality and governance differ, right? Because I can't blame them if the other agency systems are not picking up and they're like, I need a work order. Or, case in point, I have controller-owned property that needs to be cut regularly. The controller's office has to then request it to have it be cut by DPW or another agency. So what I would like us to do is to figure out a way to systematically streamline that system so that they can focus on the things that really need to matter. Like, I have no hot water. I have mold in my apartment. I have bed bugs. The floor may be caving in, right? Because those are the high level things that we need to get done. But I look at the data, high grass and weeds, trash in the alley. These are things that we know if we had a schedule for, we can deal with it and manage it and it not take hours and time. And also, just being transparent, it's a safety issue for them too. Because if you're coming back out to readdress the same issue all the time, people are gonna start noticing that trend. And that puts them in a place where their safety is in danger. And it's bad enough we have high turnover because when people meet reality actually going on the street, right? Sorry, I'm on my soapbox today, but the data has told me to say the soapbox because that is what's led. Now, my other issue is with the Special Investigations Unit in terms of VBNs, right? What I found in my district is that people have been doing unauthorized work, they've had VBNs on the building, and I'm still running into the issue like, I gotta bait this thing and I can't get a permit, and we're going back to this issue and we keep having to stop work orders on there. I think we need to have a meeting of the minds, and then this is why I reiterate why I'm putting in legislation to dictate the hours for that unit, because I think it is based on incompetence that I have to call someone at 4:30 because everyone in Baltimore City who likes to do illegal dumping and illegal work knows at 4:30 no one's coming. On Saturday, 11 o'clock a.m., no one's coming. And then my poor Baltimore City police officer who is manning a post, possibly one or two because we're short-staffed, is then put in a situation where a resident's yelling at them because my neighbor's making noises, they're knocking on the doors, there's structural issues that's happening, but they can't do anything about it. They're not trained to do it. I just want to make sure, but I'm noticing that the trend is happening at properties that have VBNs on them. Are we actively monitoring those properties with VBNs for actual construction work and making sure that they have permits? Because I can tell you over Mount Holly and Walbrook Junction, the reason why I put my legislation in for people having receipts of where they dump their trash, someone, luckily enough, threw away their permit number in the trash of demolition materials, just 2 blocks down the street, right? I just want to say that the ecosystem of efficiencies and inefficiencies all relate back to the simple thing of there's a vacant property, what are we doing with it, how we're monitoring it, and if we're done sticking with nothing but sanitation issues, how do we get to those things? Sorry to cut you off. You can continue, Deputy Commissioner.
I don't even know where to pick up.
Just tell them about that. Just focus on the sanitation team.
So we've been bringing up, we've been onboarding a sanitation team to focus on sanitation service requests, because out of the 50-some thousand that we get every year, 60% of them are for sanitation, which includes trash, debris, high grass, and weeds. So we are onboarding that team. We just brought, 4 more on, Yates? We got a total of 5 right now on the sanitation team.
Oh, thank you, Tony. My next question is because I have several owners who live in properties with VBNs, and they think that they were put on in error. Have we created a process to allow these aggrieved persons to actually say that they were aggrieved and that an error happened on our part? I'll give you an example. There's a resident on Utah Place where a lady did a lot of unpermitted work. They still had the VBN because there was open permits. That person now is in an unsafe place and they're going back and forth. More than likely, they're going to pursue litigation against us because of a mistake. So how are we creating a process that people who have been mistakenly given that VBN because of an error on our side or the previous owner can have it appealed, and that we can help them get back into code and standards?
That is the process that I mentioned earlier with Councilman Ramos's question, where we identified the staff person that would be the lead. We have identified a list of potential properties that we believe fall into this category. We have the letter and we have the form that they can fill out so we can see where they fall. Was it a property that had permits and they just didn't get their final inspections? Was it a property that didn't have any permits at all? Was it a property that was sold as a rehab property? Getting more information about that, and then how best we can help them abate that use and occupancy permit.
I think there was kind of a 2-part to your question. When an individual receives a vacant building initially, or any violation notice initially, there is an appeal process. It's printed on on every notice, and they can write in and request a hearing to challenge the notice. So that's the first part. Anybody that's purchasing a property, they're purchasing the property under the code subject to any open notices. So they should be getting the property owner that's selling the property to disclose any of those deficiencies in the property.
We passed a law to do that.
And yes. So there's 2 different pieces. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, I hear you, but I also know I have people who were in between those things where we messed up and a person didn't get actually a lien certificate. It was filed after they went to closing, right? They had a lien certificate. That reminds me, Director, I still have not received a response from your Chief of Staff related to one person. So I want to talk after this hearing about it. There are conversations that, while I hear we cured moving forward, but there are people who were before this process was created that are aggrieved that may not be in that process that can be afforded this, right? So
That, they would fall into the process that I just.
I will say that I've had a person that I've sent to both you and Director Modisett that still is in limbo, that has not been fixed. So I would say that your process sucks.
I would also say that there are points in time where we cannot, there are parts of it that we are not going to be able to fix on their behalf as well. So.
And I think that is where the lack of creativity in your agency is where I differ. And I'm just gonna say this publicly, and that is why I have lost confidence in the agency. It is a serious issue. I will tell you that I can name the individuals in the actual divisions in the agency that have made it far difficult for my residents to even trust the city of Baltimore at this point. Especially the Special Investigations Unit, right? I'm just gonna keep naming it because I did the same thing with DPW until they cleaned it up. There's a reason why DPW's water, wastewater division with their contracts have gotten tighter, because every time I had opportunity, I made sure those persons and those people in leadership knew that you need to do better. Also, the expectation for this hearing was to have the actual active number of VBNs. I know we have a dashboard, so to supplement your materials, I would like, as a committee request, that the agency provide the active VBNs as of today at 5 o'clock to be supplemented into your presentation on Legistar. And with that,
I can tell it to you, it's 12,397.
that's fine. I'd rather be on the presentation for the public to have consumption,
Okay.
because that was the expectation, not just the pretty chart. I'm just gonna be transparent with you. The level of professionalism and what I expected from the agency was not met on this portion of the presentation. So I would like a supplementary PowerPoint sent by anyone in your legislative team over to Tony Leva to supplement it with the actual data that we have from your dashboard with very much specifics in terms of the active numbers. Let's see. In that data, I also want to know how many VBNs are currently active and how does that compare to prior years, because that data is important because you've done a very large number of accuracy in terms of increasing the number and decreasing the number as well, so that the public can see the good work you are doing. But I just want to make sure that that should have been a part of this presentation as well. And then just a broader public policy question. What impact do inaccurate VBNs have on property values, insurance lending, or community redevelopment? Because these are the questions I'm hearing from my residents, and I want to have an answer from the agency as well. Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I applaud the passion, Councilwoman Ramos, of getting more VBNs and making sure we identify them. But what I'll say is, in my district, I have more VBNs than I care to see. I have my fair share, and if we start labeling more, I don't think I can take it anymore. So my question is, rather than how do we, identify more VBNs, once we have them, how do we move them things forward? Because I have VBNs that I look up that's just been put as a VBN a year and no fines, no nothing, haven't done anything. And, then the next thing you follow up and you just get another VBN notice. But what does that process look like, the turn of VBN into something besides a VBN that's been sitting for a year with no action? And how can residents take part in that process? And how can I take part in that process to make sure that ball moves forward? I know briefly was talked about how that needs to be 6 different times they come out, or can you explain that process and what we can do to kind of turn VBNs into progress in District 12?
Yeah, I think that is one of the reasons why, Mayor Scott has had a focus on reducing the number of vacant building notices, and that we've seen the largest reduction in vacant building notices since the start of his first his first term as mayor, down to the 12,397 where we are today. It is not easy to abate a vacant building notice. There's only two ways that you can get rid of that vacant building notice. It can be demolished, or you can receive the use and occupancy permit. And in many of our communities, some of that also takes time, because we also have issues with how to get title to the property. What is the process for that? You can't necessarily purchase it on the private market. That then defers back to the tools that the city has in the toolbox, whether or not it's in rem or tax sale foreclosure, condemnation, receivership. From a code enforcement standpoint, we don't take any ownership with receivership, but it's another way to push the envelope. Around 50% of all receivership cases that we end up filing, recently, we've been seeing that around the 50% mark. 50% are actually the owners are stepping up to the plate, doing the renovation, getting the use and occupancy permit on their own. It's not going to auction, but it is not an easy process. It's not straightforward. There's nuance. There's lots of, each property has its own story. Each property has its own hurdles, and that is one reason why we have a comprehensive plan. That's why we do the block level planning with the communities. That's why we do things like walk in Darley Park and kind of create a starting point, and which ones are we starting with acquisition, which ones are we doing receivership, what is that block level planning, and then tackling that, or in Broadway East or Oliver or Johnson Square, right? Those communities where, in order to abate the VBN, we have to have a solid geographical, tactical block level approach that's actually parcel level approach that identifies what strategy is associated with that property, because it's not straightforward. And the tools in the toolbox aren't ones that are fast either. The fastest, legal tool we have is coming out still around 9 months, but that's 8 to 9 months once you get to court. That doesn't count the months that you have to do the legwork ahead of time in order to be able to file the case. So I would say that there is comprehensive evaluation. It's why Reframe Baltimore exists. It's why Director Moxon was talking and led with the $3 billion strategy, because it also takes funds in order to not just get the property, but then also be able to redevelop the property or go from there.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, I'll just say that unoccupied retail is a huge citywide challenge that every Main Street director that I've talked to this is like a top priority for them. Downtown Partnership, top priority for them. This is something that I think it strikes in the heart of residents who live near a neighborhood commercial corridor when you have a lot of vacants, as all of the neighborhood commercial corridors in my district, west side of downtown, Charles Street, Federal Hill, Pennsylvania Avenue, all have this, and the way it impacts how you think about the trajectory of your neighborhood is not that much less cancerous than having a bunch of boarded up doors and windows. It's not as bad, but it is bad. And so just as a request, I don't think the tools that we have in the toolbox right now are well suited for this. As Councilwoman Ramos alluded to, I'm looking at some options as well, right? But I'll just kind of throw that out as something to flag. And I know there is, like I said, multiple council members I think have a lot of interest in solving this, and so just tossing that out there as something to look into as a priority for all the great work we're doing on the VBN side, which is typically concentrated on the residential side. So I want to just clarify for me, and this for Deputy Commissioner Hessler. So the zombie property, the second category of, thank you. The second category that you mentioned for how a building can receive a VBN citation, I think you said 2 citations of more than, that take more than 10 days to abate with, can you just talk through those 2 again?
Yeah, so it would either be a violation notice that is cited 2 different items. It could be more than 1 violation notice, but so a shutter that's falling off and a broken step could be those 2 separate violations that are issued, or in what we would refer to as an itemized notice.
Okay.
That notice normally goes out with a 30-day time frame to abate it. It also has to get posted on the property in order to perfect service. So once service is perfected, and the individual that needs to receive that notice has failed to comply, then we would be able to follow up with a vacant building notice on that. The other option would be if the house is perfect, but nobody's cutting the grass or picking up the newspapers in the front, and we hit them with citations for trash or for high grass and weeds over the course of a 12-month period, 6 separate times. That could be something that could be considered towards the nuisance vacant property. But in both cases, the property has to be unoccupied.
Okay, so the second option is the same violation 6 times.
And again, it's any sanitation citation. So it could be high grass and weeds, and then we come back and there's trash in the backyard, and then we come back and there's a bulk item. As long as it's 6 different of those sanitation type items.
Okay.
Under the
So
property
like
maintenance code.
broken window or graffiti, those would also fall into the
Broken window starts getting you more towards.
more to the direct
actual-
way. Yeah. Would graffiti fall into the sanitation category?
No, that would fall into the item on a notice. We don't issue citations for graffiti. We issue violation notices.
Okay. I'll follow up with you on this one because I do think for commercial properties that this is the way that we can get these like properties that are long-term vacant and bad, like they have a clear negative impact on the neighborhood around them, not just because they're unoccupied. So I'll follow up with you and let's talk about that in the next couple of days. And then lastly, I'll copy. Councilman Gray does this thing where he always starts off his spiels with complimenting some employee in the agency in question. And so I'll just give a shout out to Chantel Quarles, who is very hardworking and responsive and just always a joy to be around and to work with. So I will just plug that as well for Deputy Commissioner Booker because we got the team behind you. So that's all I have. Mr. Chair.
Any further questions, colleagues, or comments? Going once, going twice. So we can go home. Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to clarify some of my statements before we leave. I'm being hard on the agency because I've sat in this seat for almost 5 years come December. I've seen the progress made by the men and women who go out every day. It is my issue, and I just want to make sure the administration hears this, with leadership in terms of the creativity and the innovation that we need to meet the muster of the 300 plus men and women that serve us every day. I say that as a person who has seen the best of the men and women who are in that back row, but seen the worst of when this agency fails to meet this small, low-hanging fruit, and how that has negatively impacted Black and brown neighborhoods, whether it's from illegal dumping to persons who are doing work without a permit, to just simply the agency leading with the question no rather than innovation. And that is the theme of why I asked my questions tonight. I'm often met with a no, not a how we can figure it out. And I just want to level set for the public that I no longer accept no. The question is either you get on board or let the train move over you because I'm going to get the 10 votes to get it done. And I mean this for the SEIU unit. Shape up, figure it out, how people can work, because I'm just gonna prelay it for our residents. I'm gonna put in legislation that requires them to work from 4:30 to 11 o'clock at night. Whether you're on call or getting night differential, your butt's gonna be out there looking out. But also, this agency is gonna have to get drones. It's gonna have to get digital cameras that allow us to do cloud-based things to monitor areas that are actually being legally dumped. Instead of us depending on the footage, let's call a police officer who can actually respond right away to that illegal dumping, because we do have an actual environmental police department through DPW that once housed the Special Investigations Unit. This is what I mean that we can go back to things that make sense, especially since they have 5 officers that we paid for, that could be available outside of protecting our waterways and our water stations and protecting our drinking water. We have opportunities to be innovative and work consistently with other agencies. What I see as the failure is that we are not allowing the work of the men and women who are out there every day to correspondingly leak over into other agencies. There is no need to have you to go back out in the alleyway or go and measure grass again when we know this property is consistently every year going to need to be cut. And we can plan it with all the resources that we have with our innovation team. We actually have a grass cutting stat that we can actually talk about, right? That I still have not gained access to in terms of that data, but I can pull it myself and do some pivot tables and charts and tell you that it's not being met. So while I'm hard on you, I love you all, but I just say that my grandmother raised me 2 things. Too much is given, much is expected. You were given a lot more resources the last couple of years when other agencies were not. And with those resources, I want you to do better and be better. If not, then leave. Thank you. We are recessed.